It's time for Twit This Week in Tech. I know you're looking at the play bar on your podcast client and you're saying 2.5 hours, but let me tell you, it's going to be the best 2.5 hours you ever spent. Greg Farrow is here from the Packet Pushers Network. Ian Thompson from the register.co.uk. The reason we went so long is we had so many great discussions about Apple and its iPhone, about the new Amazon Echoes. What are they up to? About the new Blade Runner movie. And ultimately, we talked about the fundamental problem Silicon Valley is having as people start to turn their back on tech. It's all coming up next on Twit.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for This Week in Tech is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com. This is Twit, This Week in Tech, episode 634, recorded Sunday, October 1st, 2017. An Apple Watch walks into a bar. This Week in Tech is brought to you by WordPress. Your customers want to find you, so build a WordPress.com website and help them connect with your business. You can get 15% off any new plan purchase at WordPress.com/twit. And by Casper, an online retailer of premium mattresses for a fraction of the price, because everyone deserves a great night's sleep. Get $50 off any mattress purchase by visiting Casper.com/twit and entering the promo code TWIT. And by Stamps.com. Start using your time more effectively with Stamps.com. Use Stamps.com to buy and print real U.S. postage the instant you need it right from your desk. To get my special offer, go to Stamps.com, click on the microphone, and enter TWIT. And by FreshBooks, the ridiculously easy-to-use cloud accounting software used by over 10 million people. Try it free for 30 days at freshbooks.com/twit. It's time for Twit This Week in Tech, the show where we cover the week's tech news. And really, this show is going to be a remedial show for me because I've been gone for the last 2 weeks. I have no idea what happened. Thank God we have two of the best in studio with us. They just happen to both be from, the colonies. No, we're the colonies. You're the Empire, Ian Thompson from the UK.
Such as it is at the moment. I mean, sort of a small postbox in Gibraltar and the Falkland Islands, and that's pretty much it. So,
it's not a huge empire. Former colonies, but now a nation state on their own, but he does live in the UK. Greg Farrow from the Packet Pushers Network.
Hello, everybody.
We're sorry
Thanks
that you're not in
for having me
studio. You were supposed to be here, but you broke your ankle or something.
Yeah, so I've been getting healthy, and I decided that I would walk more.
Big mistake.
And in the process of walking, I fractured my ankle and ended up in hospital with a plaster cast and blah, blah, blah.
I'm sorry.
Just goes to show exercise is unhealthy.
Yes, I believe that the evidence might point to this.
Look at Douglas Adams. You know, if he'd never have gone into that gym, we might have yet another Hitchhiker's book.
God, that's depressing.
The world needs more of those, that's for sure.
Hey, where's my, did you steal my iPhone 8? I put it right here. I was going to show that I have the latest and greatest thing. But it is, I don't anymore. I had a Note 8 and an iPhone 8. Oh, wait a minute. I'm sitting on them. Not recommended, but
from what I've heard, you're lucky you haven't cracked it doing that.
So while I was gone, Apple shipped iPhone 8s to some lucky members of the press as well as some actual users. This I've been playing with for a couple of days. I had the Note 8 right before I left. But none of this matters one whit because on Wednesday, Google's going to announce new Pixels. And someday, this year, maybe next year, Apple's going to start shipping the iPhone 10, which the world resolutely calls the iPhone X.
Yes.
Is there a consensus yet on whether Apple's selling any of these iPhone 8s? It feels to me it was so easy to waltz into the online store at 12:01 Pacific time and buy this. It feels like it's not selling like hotcakes.
I don't think it's flying off the shelves by any manner of means. I mean, it's there's nothing in there that is a must-have.
No, it's not a huge difference.
It's like a tick or you've got ticks and tocks in evolution, and this is just a slight tick. And it keeps a lot of the things that people didn't like about the last iPhone, and it doesn't really add an awful lot more. So I'm going to be at the Pixel event on Wednesday. I'm curious to see what they've done, although it does look as though they too are abandoning the 3.5mm jack which is unless they can give me a damn good reason for that, I'm going to hammer them on it.
That's why I think the Note 8 might be the phone of choice, despite the bizarrely positioned fingerprint reader.
But you've got an Essential. How are you finding that?
I have an Essential in the other room. It cracked the first day. That was one problem.
Ooh.
This amazing ceramic and titanium impervious design cracked without any impact. It just cracked.
That's not good.
So I think that, I don't know about
5,000 phones they've sold through Sprint. Now, that's not the only source, but I think that this is a phone without a market, don't you think?
No, I mean, 5,000 phones is a rounding error compared to Apple or Android.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's...
Here, from Slice Intelligence. So Slice, as you know, that's that app. I use it that tells you when you're getting stuff on its way. Slice has 5 million users. And iPhone 8 sales, not good. These bar graph here shows sales in the first 5 days following launch. Or I told you, I'm a little punchy. iPhone 6, wow, big. There's no scale on this, so I don't know how big is. N equals 146,556 shoppers. I don't know what any of this means. I can't read it. iPhone 7 Plus, the next biggest seller, then the 7, then the 6 Plus, the 6S. Way down at the bottom, the iPhone 8 Plus, and an even smaller wedge, the iPhone 8. Now, that's not Apple's stat. Apple won't tell. But that is Slice's stat. Ming-Chi Kuo, the analyst, also said sales have been sluggish of the iPhone 8. And the stock market seems to think so. Apple's stock has been going down.
Yeah.
The question really for us is that because people are waiting for the iPhone 10?
I think
I think so.
Oh, sorry.
You think so,
really
Greg?
do. I really think so. I think that there's a bunch of early adopters where money's not a problem. It's all about having the latest and greatest phones. And there's people in the Android space for this as well. And, back in the days of Microsoft Windows phones, et cetera, they wanted the latest and greatest. And so I think Apple's made a fundamental flaw here, introducing the iPhone 8 and the iPhone X or 10 at the same time, right?
They Osborne
what they should have done
almost, right?
Yeah, they should have released the iPhone 8 and said, this is the best phone we've ever made, and then come around for another announcement in 3 or 4 or 5, 6 months' time and said, here's the iPhone 10. This is our step change.
Yeah, but how
annoying
annoying would that be for people who bought the iPhone 8 to find out 6 months later, oh, it's already obsolete?
Well,
and
why?
that's the
I
challenge.
think Apple,
And they also
it's
don't
a
want to miss
challenge.
the holiday season.
Why did they even bother doing an iPhone 8? Because they couldn't make enough X's.
Well, also because there's a very limited market for people who are going to spend 12 grand on a phone.
See, I just 12,100.
Sorry, 1,200 on a phone. Even
But
smaller market for 12 grand, but yeah.
I'm not sure about that. I think that here would be my guess. The iPhone 10 is going to end up, if they can make it, and that's
make it work.
not an insignificant if they can make it, is going to sell as well as any other iPhone. That's the one people want and are waiting for. And what it really, to me, points out is that the iPhone is not about technology. This is marginally, the 8 is marginally better than the 7. Not anything to write home about. If you have a 7, unless you absolutely have to have wireless charging or that goofy portrait stuff that they're doing, there's no reason to upgrade this. Yes, it's a incredible. Malik wrote this paean to the A11 Bionic processor and Apple's amazing ability to do its own fabs and to do its own GPU now for the first time and do its own amazing chip. And this chip is so fast it's comparable to a MacBook Pro, but you don't need it. It's like driving a Ferrari on a local city street.
Top 3 things people use these for are browsing the internet, navigation, and making calls. And there is no significant improvement with the iPhone 8 in that. And I got to say also with the iPhone 10, there's not a real significant. I mean, they've got rid of the home button. Well, that's going to be more irritating than not.
It's a negative.
A definite negative. The facial recognition thing, unless that works flawlessly out the box, they're going to lose a lot of goodwill on that. And by all accounts, it's a fairly fragile piece of kit as well. So, and repairability is not good with Apple products, to put it mildly. So, I don't know. I think they could actually be heading for a fall on this one.
They may have kneecapped themselves by doing these 3 phones in this kind of odd strategy. By the way, they offer still an iPhone SE at $350, an iPhone 6S at $450, an iPhone 7 at $550, an iPhone 8 at $700, an iPhone 10 at $1,000. This is exactly what Steve Jobs, when he came back after leaving Apple, said was wrong with Apple. They had too many SKUs. This is... So
Well, I think there's a few things going on here, and then some of them are economic, and some of them are market driven. So the idea is that the iPhone 10 shifts the price for the premium phone up from $700 to over $1,000, and that's key to getting the ARPU, average revenue per user, up for Apple. And they haven't been able to shift above because they've always had just one phone. And when you have just one phone, it has to be a price that appeals to the widest possible audience. So by running multiple product lines, you're now able to ship more products to more price brackets. And in theory, you should be selling more, and you also should be selling more at higher values. Now, keep in mind also that the iPhone 6S and the previous generations, the production processes have been maximized. They're efficient. They've been working. They know how to make those phones at high profit margins now and produce them in volume. So the average profit margin on those older units is rumored to be very high, much higher than it was, say, 3 or 4 years ago, and they can produce them en masse. So they're increasing the average sale price per unit by jumping in with the iPhone X without disrupting all the stacks underneath. And I think this is the trick is, I think Apple was trying to be greedy here by introducing the iPhone X in time for the holiday season, the Christmas period, where everybody says, oh, I can buy myself a new iPhone because I can buy myself a Christmas present, or I can buy one for somebody else, and so forth. They really should have taken a step back and said, well, we'll ship the iPhone 8 and then we'll come back for the iPhone 10 in, March next year or something like that.
I would skip the 8 and just go straight to the 10.
I don't think it makes sense to do that. Too many people are used to the yearly cadence, and they're expecting to see an upgrade. The iPhone 8 is a perfectly acceptable upgrade, and no.
If you're coming from a 6 or earlier, yes.
Or a 7, yes.
Not a 7.
And in the same way that
I don't think it's a suitable upgrade from a 7. It's too close to a 7.
But nobody who's owned, well, and let me restate that. There are people who are early adopters who will buy whatever Apple ships to have the latest phone for this year, and those people are not going to rush out and buy the 8. They're going to go and buy the iPhone 10.
Yeah. And so this is really
them is not an object.
My real question isn't that what's really going on? Is that Ben Thompson breaks it down. There's two people who buy iPhones. He actually has an excellent article on Stratechery talking about this strategy.
He does.
One of the keys. He says that 2 of the markets identified are customers who want the best possible phone and customers who want the prestige of owning the highest status phone on the market. For those customers, the iPhone 10 is really the only option, right?
Yeah.
And I even think Apple's very well aware of this, that one of the controversial features of this iPhone 10 is this bizarre notch at the top. Samsung managed to make a screen as big, in fact, a little bit bigger with better resolution with no notch at all. They just made it start a little bit lower on the screen.
It seems to be the normal way.
That seems a normal way, but I think there's a reason why Apple wanted the notch. It's not for technical reasons. It's not because it needed to be there. It's because it makes it so that you can have one, and immediately it's apparent you have the newest, latest, hard-to-get phone.
Yeah, you see it.
It's fins.
Yeah, I mean, at the Reg, we called this the Cupertino idiot tax. It's basically, there are a bunch of people who, no matter what it costs, will buy the latest and greatest Apple kit. And it's not just Apple, it goes across some other firms, but Apple users are fanatical about this. And they're not going to buy the 8, they're going to wait until the 10. People who have just bought a 7 a year ago probably aren't going to buy the 8 for another 6 months. And what is worrying is that Apple now has this long line of products. And as we saw with Apple before Jobs actually came back, that was what was killing the company. You had a plethora of different computers, all of them not particularly good. And I do think this exposes a real problem with Apple.
That's my question. Isn't this confusing to consumers?
No, I think you're assuming that the cost of the old phones is actually holding old inventory or producing old inventory or having too many SKUs is hard. And yet Apple's still producing the same 6S that it's already shipped 150 million units of.
Right.
So the robots that make it, the production lines that produce the screens, the chips that are inside it, don't cost them a lot of money to get a handle on. So it's not like keeping those lines running kills them.
No, that's true.
Right.
It's not that Apple can't do it. Clearly, Apple has logistics down. It's a question of whether it confuses the market. Now, Ben does point out there's a third Apple phone buyer, customers who want to own a top-of-the-line iPhone but can't afford one. And it's his position that that's what these other ones are for, particularly the 6S and the SE.
Well, yeah, if you've got a MacBook and you're bought into the entire Apple
you want to be
ecosystem,
Apple.
then
You want to be part of the group, but you can't quite afford the 10 or even an 8. So that makes sense. He says that Apple's taking a pretty significant risk, in particular with the iPhone 8. He says, we know the company can succeed selling the best phone, but he points to the 5C, the one with the plastic color back.
Yeah.
The example of building a less than best phone was underwhelming. It hardly sold. So how many, he asks, how many iPhone buyers will forego the 8 to wait for the 10? It's my suspicion that that's what's happening, is that a great many people either are that third category and they're going to buy or stick with most of them will stick with their iPhone. If they're buying an iPhone, they're going to get a lower end, less expensive iPhone. And the rest are status conscious people or people who want the best phone. Or really, it's the best iPhone, because I would argue that the 10 isn't particularly spectacularly technically advanced.
This is what kind of is worrying me about Apple's strategy at the moment, in that since Jobs died, they haven't come up with a groundbreaking product. It's just been iterations of what came before.
Well, look what's happening with the watch now. They released a watch that has massive technical issues with connectivity.
And also is a really bad deal for consumers in terms of data costs. Because you're not actually adding that much to your data cost, but you're having to pay an extra $10 more a month. It just there's only so long you can squeeze sheep before, things start going out of hand.
Here's the interesting thing. I don't think it's going to hurt Apple. It would hurt any other company. I don't think it's going to hurt
difficult to hurt Apple, but, Apple used to be, the same God mode technology company, and they lost it in the mid-90s. They've
pivoted. They used to be a God mode technology company.
Please don't tell me you use the pivot word.
Now they're a fashion. No, they're a fashion company. They're a status company. And I tell you what, I see among affluent people who can afford them, iPhones completely dominate. Right? If you can afford an iPhone, you buy an iPhone for the most part. Only a few geeks like us prefer Android phones. And I think that they continue to own that. And they don't own it for technical reasons. What was the whole noise about AR? Like these phones were going to be the next breakthrough in AR. I downloaded all the AR apps. There's nothing.
Yeah.
This is not a breakthrough in AR.
But you see, it was the same thing with the Samsung and their VR headset. I got a unit of that, tried it out. The amount of good VR stuff out there which you can realistically download, put onto a phone and run is minimal. We're still in the hype cycle upswing on this one.
The funny thing is that the hardware you need to do really good AR is actually on the iPhone 10. It's just facing you. It's facing the wrong way, and it's used for two and only two things. This is very typical of Apple. They put NFC in, but they didn't allow anybody to use it. Yeah. They put all this, super duper Connect technology with the dot painting, projection lights, and the infrared sensors pointed at you, so you could do Face ID, because they decided unaccountably to remove a perfectly good biometric authentication that everybody liked, had gotten used to. It was very effective.
And it's easy to use. If you're in the car, you can't hold it in front of you.
They removed it, so they had to put this face recognition in. So that's one reason you get this. And the other reason is so you can do animated emojis, and you're not getting any of the AR benefit. If they put that on the other side, that would be a Tango-like high-quality AR engine. But they don't. They didn't. So it just.
But then again,
they're
putting it on the iPhone 10. They're not putting it in the iPhone 8. They could have put it in the iPhone 8 and sold it to the mass market. The iPhone 10 is intended to be a test. There's a vision of the iPhone 10 as a trial. Can we produce enough OLED screens? Can we produce units with the Face ID capability?
They're not
Can
even producing the OLED screens. They're not producing any of these components. They're buying them from Samsung.
Sure they are, but can Samsung produce them at Apple iPhone numbers?
Right.
Can Samsung produce 1 million units a month and scale up to 10 million units enough? And Apple didn't think that Samsung can do that. And I think the challenge is that if they tried to put an OLED screen into the iPhone 8, that the fear is that Samsung wouldn't have been able to produce enough screens to meet demand anytime in the next year, no matter how many robots. I mean, you've seen Apple spend like $4 billion pre-ordering components, which is giving those companies enough money to go and buy the robots. Some of those robots are like $250 million each to make some of these parts inside of here.
We should thank Apple, because it's this kind of thing. It's since 2007 that's propelled so many other markets, because Apple has made it easier and cheaper to make all sorts of these components. That's why we have drones. That's why we have so many amazing technologies. Frankly, it's why we have all these other good smartphones, is because Apple put all the money in up front to make the pipeline.
Although if you look
work.
at how they've dealt with some of their suppliers, it's been slightly less than ethical.
They're draconian, yes.
Yeah, but at the same time, you're right. I mean, Apple didn't invent the smartphone. It just made it sexy. It made it something that people actually wanted.
And they sold them in massive quantities.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And they deserve credit for that. But I just
Ben
wonder...
has an interesting theory about the iPhone 10 that it's really intended for China, where the number one... First of all, Apple's been suffering in China. They've been beaten by the Chinese, by Huawei, by ZTE, by Xiaomi. They're doing very well in China, and iPhone sales have plummeted. But it's apparently a very status-conscious market. And Ben's in Taiwan, so I think he has some insight into this. And he says the iPhone 10 will be a massive hit in China. In particular, I wouldn't be surprised if most of the early iPhone 10 supply, were earmarked for China.
It makes sense. There's a lot of money sloshing around there.
And Apple would love to come back and get that market back. They're not going to be able to. We heard Wall Street Journal had a story that two of the components in the iPhone 10, Romeo and Juliet, as one might expect, are a pair
that kill each other, or
they both die at the end. No, they're a pair of components that are needed in it, and one of them is behind. I can't remember if it's Romeo or Juliet, and that's what's going to hold up. This was a story earlier this week. Imbalance with modules fuels concern about widespread sales shortages.
You see, they're not going to sell.
It's part of the face
They're going to
recognition.
keep, if they want to keep this as a premium product, make it fairly difficult to buy. Have long waiting lists. You know, if you want to flood into China and put a bunch of stuff there, that's fine. We could end up with a situation where you actually get people queuing up in China to buy iPhone 10s and sending them back to the US rather than the other way around as it was 5 years ago. So, I don't know. It could work in China, but it's a lot of money to spend on a phone. And yeah, $1,000 for the base spec model, that's pushing it.
Yeah, but at the same time, Apple's not abandoning those other users. It's keeping the 7, the 6, and the 5 for those customers who want it. And it's not producing a cut-down version of it. It's still producing the same premium phone that it was producing just 2 or 3 years ago, which, you know what, for a lot of people is actually perfectly functional. I want to come back to the China thing. I think there's one thing you need to realize about China too, is that most of the American tech companies have actually been booted out of China. No Google, no Facebook, no Netflix, no Amazon, right? All of those have been chased out of China because they won't conform to what the Chinese government wants. And Apple is almost the last of the American tech companies that are still there. We'll talk later on about Scott Galloway, who's talking about how the US tech giants are starting to face a lashback. I hope we talk about it because it's one of my favorite topics.
Yeah, in fact, I really want to talk about that,
Yeah. And, you know, so Apple is one of the last US tech companies that's doing business in China. So if it does something specific for the Chinese market, that makes absolute perfect sense.
They already did, didn't they? They yanked the VPN apps from the App Store.
Yes, no, they've shown themselves quite willing to play ball when it comes to dealing with the Chinese authorities in a way that you're right.
But they've done that for... So don't go all pro-Chinese here, right? Because that's what you're effectively doing. Remember that Apple has been kowtowing to any legally... legitimate challenge from any government anywhere in the world, be it Australia, be it the UK, be it the US, as long as the challenge or the requests are legitimate and formed by the duly elected or the government in charge, Apple will always do that, and it always has done.
I don't even think it's a bad strategy. I think that, I mean, you might have political qualms about it, humanitarian qualms about it, but and I'm glad Google, for instance, decides not to play that game.
Yeah.
But if you're from a purely capitalist business point of view, I understand why Apple's doing exactly what it's doing.
Oh, yeah.
I think the thing that's hard for me, and I think the thing that we have to recognize, though, is that Apple isn't really a tech company exactly anymore. It's a jewelry company. It's a fashion company. It's a lifestyle company. It's a marketing company. And that's a perfectly fine thing for it to be. It's a good business. Nice work if you get it.
It's a very popular business model.
Nothing wrong with it. It's sad to me.
Google runs the same business model.
I know, but it's sad to me because I'm a geek. I want it to be a tech company. I don't want it to be a fashion company, a lifestyle company.
No, the last 10 years, most tech companies have been fashion companies or image conscious or about selling. How about monetizing?
Well, that doesn't explain why the Google Pixel is so damn ugly.
And also,
if this is Google's fashionable statement, they got a problem. They got to hire Angela Ahrendts or somebody.
well, it's really weird what they've done with the Pixel line, because, you know, when they started off with the Nexus line, they were cheap, bare bones.
They were really developer
developer units. Yeah. And then they brought out the Pixel last year. They jacked the price up nearly 40%. You didn't get a lot extra for it. You got a reskinned version of Android. You know, they're like, well, you know, we want to compete with the iPhone. We want to be a fashionable phone. And you're right. It's butt ugly. I mean, compared to a lot of the...
We'll see Wednesday what they can do. And the early leaked designs look a little bit better. They're full bezel. I agree with you. I'm really disheartened if they take the headphone jack out. But
yeah, unfortunately, that seems to be the way of things at the moment. Headphone jacks are becoming rapidly extinct.
What is Google doing? They spent $1 billion to buy some of HTC's assets.
Stuff. Yeah.
They remember that they bought Motorola. It didn't go well. They sold it at a loss. They tried to be in the phone business.
But they kept access to the patents.
That really what they wanted was the patents.
That was what.
So they got the patents, but they weren't trying to be in the phone business. But now apparently they really are trying to be. What did they? HTC says, "Oh no, we're going to still make phones." That I find hard to believe.
Well, we've seen a rash of articles this week about people talking about how Apple's integrated supply line, because it owns its chips and designs its own CPUs and gets them manufactured, and because it has complete control of the iPhone assembly, even though they outsource the assembly to Foxconn or in China, they're still very heavily involved. And people are saying this vertically integrated supply chain.
It's brilliant.
Last week, we saw them get into the Toshiba deal.
It's Tim Cook's greatest creation.
Yes. And we're seeing them get into the partnering with Bain Capital, or rumored to be partnering with Bain Capital, to drop a few $1 billion into buying Toshiba so they can get control of the DRAM supply. And I just wonder if Google's saying, you know what, Apple's doing this, we have to start thinking about doing the same thing before they get too far away from us. If Apple gets too far away, gets this integrated supply and their leadership, I mean, Apple's already 3-4 years ahead of Samsung. If they continue to be able to do this, then where does that leave Android?
And operations are traditionally Tim Cook's strong point.
Oh, this is where he comes from.
Yeah, this is his background. This is what he's done very well. Yeah. He's very good at taking over the whole supply chain, squeezing suppliers to maximize profits. It's a great business model.
Steve Jobs' vision. He always said, if you want to succeed, you have to own the whole stack, hardware and software. And taking it one step farther, you have to make the chips. You have to make all the parts. And they have shown that they can make the benchmarks, as I said, for the A11 Bionic are astounding.
Well, this is what I don't understand.
They run rings around the Samsung Note 8, for instance.
But this is what I don't understand, why Apple isn't playing to its strengths up to a point. Because, I mean, if you look at the security aspects of it, owning your own hardware and software stack, proper code checking before it goes into the store, there is a great selling point for Apple phones on security, because Android... In the Play Store, we've had, let's see, malware outbreaks in January, March, April, July, 2 in September. It's getting silly at the moment. And Android users are disproportionately getting hit by viruses. So they should use this as a selling point.
It's a huge opportunity. Ironically, they're not selling to the technically literate. They're selling...
Yeah. It's
a lifestyle.
Yeah.
It really is a lifestyle, which works.
So the transition here is that the integrated supply chain fires in the face of everything we've done for the last 20 years in tech. So if you go back to where Microsoft started, their value was that they disaggregated the operating system away from the computer. And the PC disaggregated the supply chain of the hardware because it used an Intel CPU and somebody else's chips and somebody else's bus, the ISA bus, and the power supply was all, stock off the shelf. The idea is that we should be disaggregating everything into pieces, and we should be having each company, bid to make the piece. And now all of a sudden, Apple's integrating it back together. So if you continue to follow Ben, he talks a lot about his theory of aggregation. What he's saying now is you disaggregate, and then what you do is you bang it back together in a different way. You aggregate or you bond it back together in a different way, making sure that you now control that some element of that new aggregation. Now you own it. And if that theory of aggregation, holds true, then what you're seeing is that Apple's now stabilizing or morphing into a solid lock on the thing that it's got. But somebody's going to come along and disaggregate it in the future. And this is what's happening in China. Again, Ben Thompson from Stratechery says in China, the point is that the aggregation happens in WeChat above it. Like
Yes.
every Chinese citizen uses a software. So the phone underneath, whether it's iOS or Android or Windows or whoever's operating system, actually matters less to a large enough audience as it does, say, in Western markets. And so there's actually a different transition in the Chinese market to the Western markets.
It's a complicated world we live in. I don't even pretend to understand what these companies are doing.
A lot of it now is coming down, as you say, the hardware is less and less important. It's coming down to which ecosystem you buy into.
Yeah.
And
Android is not really an ecosystem. It's just too fragmented. It's now a Samsung or a Google ecosystem, not
no,
an
but
Android.
I mean, if you use, say, like many companies do, use Google Apps in the office, you're a Gmail user.
It's kind of a loosely.
Yeah, so there is an
bound
incentive to stay with Android in that thing. Yeah. If you're using MacBook Pro and Mac OS all the way along the line, there's a massive incentive to go with an iPhone. I mean, my wife has just upgraded her phone, and I tried her out on a couple of Androids, and she's just like, yeah, but then when I've tried linking in and syncing up my iTunes and getting everything else done, and there's going to be an enormous amount of work in changing ecosystems. So, it's we're increasingly getting locked into these things.
I think it's certainly possible. It just asking people to change is actually incredibly hard. So humans are not very good at change, as we well know. And once they've walked down a certain path, that's very difficult. So recently I bought my wife's parents some iPhones. But the reason I bought them iPhones instead of some low-cost, they can barely use it to send an SMS message, much less surf the internet on it, much less take photos or listen to music. But the reason I bought them iPhones is just because I have to support the blasted things, and I just can't be bothered working out what Android to buy. It was just too hard. And, all the Android phones that I wanted to buy for $300 were all running Android 4, which was just so basically insecure that it wasn't, I was just not willing to give it to them.
Yeah. It's fascinating to watch. I think that I read a tweet, I think it was this morning, where the guy was talking about all the pundits who think they understand why a company does what it does, and when pundits who are not running the companies say things like, well, I don't understand why Apple's doing this, it's very likely they don't really understand what Apple's up to at all. And I would say that Tim Cook probably knows a lot better what he's up to. Oh, yeah. But it's fun to kind of try to penetrate the Kremlin wall and understand a little bit better what their long-term strategy is. It's not. It's becoming less and less a tech story, though. And
yes, but I mean,
but ironically, it's funny because in the process of controlling all the components in an iPhone, they've actually put a processor that's well ahead of anybody else's processor in here, and I would submit unnecessarily. It provides power to well beyond anything that you need. And yes, they make it themselves, so maybe that's the benefit, not the power. But maybe there's some goal down the road. Maybe this phone is, that's what we thought at first, well, that's all going to be for the AR. But there is no AR.
I think they're seeding the market. The point is that, so for example, I have an Apple Watch 3. It arrived earlier in the week. I'm not a huge Apple Watch fan. I'm a modest user of one. I had an Apple Watch 0, and it was fine. It wasn't bad, but I wanted something that just ran a little bit faster. But particularly, I wanted something a little bit lighter. So the new Apple Watch 3 is quite nice. And what I've discovered is I now get 2 days charge out of it. I have the LTE.
How do they do that? That's impressive.
Yes.
Given that they have all these new radios and so forth. Mine comes tomorrow.
I got the LTE version, but I didn't hook it up.
By the way, support my thesis that it's all about fashion. It's indistinguishable from the other Apple Watches except for a very visible red dot on the stem. And that's not there by accident. That's to say, I have the latest Apple Watch. Right?
Yeah.
That's the part you point at people.
Yeah.
So I have the LTE version, but I don't have it connected to the LTE network and probably never will. I just wanted the other stuff that was in there. So just because there's technology in something doesn't mean that it gets used.
Yeah. I think that's
it's a bit like the FM radios in the iPhone, which was an issue
Let's
that came up.
talk about that. I want to take a break because I would like to know what you all think about this with the
American Pie shooting his mouth off again. Yes.
But maybe not. But maybe not. I don't know. Apple says, well, there's no radio in there, except that there is, sort of.
Kind of.
Well, but I'm not convinced that Apple's right on this one. I'm not sure. So that's why I want the smarter minds who are here to explain it to me. Ian Thompson from the register.co.uk. Greg Farrow from the Packet Pushers Network, an excellent technical podcast network, and of course at Ethereal Mind on the Twitter. Our show today brought to you by my host, actually the company that hosts 28% of all the websites in the world, WordPress.com. That's not strictly fair. 28% of all the internet sites in the world run on WordPress. Some of them host it themselves. Some of them use WordPress hosting. Actually, some of the biggest companies in the world run on WordPress.com using their VIP plan, including Quartz. Quartz, when it came out, everybody said, this is the most amazing website. Look at the technology they're using. It was WordPress. My blog, not anywhere close to Quartz, is using WordPress. And your business should be using WordPress. Every day, millions of people go online doing one thing, trying to find out about local businesses, trying to find out about your business. Even if you're a plumber, if you're selling, dishes, if whatever your business is, it doesn't exist without a website. And it's not enough to say, oh, we got a Facebook page or we've got a Twitter account. That's not your page. You need to have your own website. And I know why you don't. If you don't, it's because it's too much trouble. I don't want to become a web guru. You can do it on WordPress. It's easy. It'll make it easy for your customers to find you, to connect with you, to hear how you can help them. Your business must have an online home, and you don't have to be a web expert to do it. You just need WordPress.com website. Choose from hundreds of beautiful designs. It's got built-in search engine optimization. It'll boost your visibility. Social sharing is automatic, so your visitors can help promote your business on their Twitter and Facebook. You can activate other WordPress plugins for the functionality your business needs. It's all the goodness of WordPress, but you don't have to worry about keeping it up to date. You don't have to worry about keeping it secure. They do that for you. And with a WordPress.com plan, you can get expert support. You focus on your business, they'll make your website the best. That's what you want. WordPress.com is also a community of people who can help build your traffic because they've got a follow button on there. I'm a huge fan. It couldn't be easier. It's a great way to start. And because it's such a dominant platform, if you do decide, I want to hire somebody to help me with my site, there are plenty of experts out there. All the software out there supports the WordPress API. It's just the king of the hill. WordPress.com/twit. If you go there right now, you can get 15% off any new plan purchase. That's WordPress.com/twit. 15% off. And we thank WordPress so much, not only for supporting Twit, but for helping me keep my website going. So, Ajit Pai, chairman of the FCC, joined in on something actually I agree with. Many phones have FM radios, and in other parts of the world, there's FM radios are on the phones. The carriers in the United States make these companies disable the radios if they're in the phones, disable the radios because they don't want people listening to free broadcast music. They want them to use expensive streaming services. That's a business model for them. And so the United States, most phones, even if they have the hardware, don't turn on the radio. I agree with Ajit Pai. In fact, it's not just Ajit Pai. The National Association of Broadcasters and others have said there's been a whole movement to turn these radios on. They're useful, particularly in cases of emergency. Forget what the carriers want. Forget their business model. The hardware is there. Turn them on. Now, Ajit Pai said Apple should do this. Put the safety of the American people first. Step up to the plate. Apple is the one major phone manufacturer that's resisted doing this. I hope the company will reconsider its position, activate those FM chips, to which Apple responded, Apple cares a lot about our users, especially in crises. We've got emergency services and medical ID information on the lock screen. We enable government emergency notifications. But iPhone 7 and 8 models do not have FM radio chips in them. No. Nor do they have antennas to support FM signals.
That's the key. It's the antenna, I think. You might be able to job an FM radio. Mind you, I should imagine they've built them out of the design spec fairly early, but you've got to have the antenna to make it work.
I think there's an FM radio in there. I'm not convinced that there isn't the hardware to do it. I understand the antenna because on all these other phones, the antenna is the headphones. And Apple, of course, has no headphone jack.
Yeah.
That's why, notably, they mentioned the iPhone 7 and 8 models. But so you tell me, because you're in Britain, don't all your phones have FM radios?
No.
No?
No. So the way I think it works is that every FM radio is fundamentally a thing called a DSP, or a digital signal
it's
processor.
software radio.
Yeah, and so what is in every iPhone is a chip. We usually call it the baseband modem, but a baseband modem is basically a gaggle of DSPs that receive the signal. So that signal is normally 2G, 3G, 4G, LTE, LTE plus, blah, blah, blah. And every iteration of the iPhone includes a new version of the baseband modem chip. And one of the things that I believe, now I'm not an expert here, but I believe that you can often program the baseband modem to be an FM radio, because there's no difference between an FM radio signal encoded onto that chip. You can use this, basically just a piece of software to decode it, and then you can then use the DSP functionality. So it's possible that the baseband modem chips that are in the iPhones have DSPs that are capable of being used for FM radios. It does not mean that they are necessarily enabled in the chips that Apple has purchased. So that is, they may be crippled at factory. If indeed, I suspect at the volume that Apple's making those chips, they've been designed out in a custom design, in the same way that the A11 Bionic chip, you know, an A10 and all that sort of stuff is really, really customized. You don't want a CPU, you don't want a DSP in your baseband modem burning electricity. What you probably want to do is just shut it off. So usually the way you do it is when you design the chip, you burn the links in there so that that part of the chip just gets isolated and it doesn't draw current. And so it's not creating heat that you have to get rid of, and it's not drawing current so that your battery runs down. So that's part one. For a lot of phones, it is true there are DSPs that can be repurposed. There is no guarantee that those DSPs are actually enabled or even in the silicon that Apple buys. Point one. Point two, you must have an antenna to feed the signal into the DSP. Every antenna must be custom designed to receive the frequencies on which you are receiving. So that is why in your iPhone, around the top here is your 2.4 gigahertz. The side down here is your 5 gigahertz. And over here is your 2G, 3G LTE, right? Every Apple iPhone for the last 5 years has the steel band around the outside as the antennas. And you see these little divots around the side, the plastic bits, which actually separates the antennas. There is no antenna in here that will receive an FM signal. It has to be a very precise, like as someone who did antenna design at university, the physics that goes into this is just mind-bogglingly arcane. And unless
isn't it the case, though, Greg, that many phones use their headphones, the wires in the headphones as antennas? Those are not specially designed.
Well, your headphone jack has to take that signal out. Apple uses the TRRS, or the four-way jack, to be the headphone controller. So you can't use it for, you need to have something that's going to pull the FM signal out of that and then decode it. And that means, again, there must be chips inside the phone decoding that off the headphone jack.
I note that Apple says 7 and 8. It doesn't mention other iPhones that it sells.
No,
I don't know. I'm not convinced that Apple's being. I think Apple may be being a little disingenuous.
No. And then the third thing is licensing. If you're using an FM radio inside the BMC, you'll probably have to pay a license fee for it, and because the company whose intellectual property produces those chips. And then the fourth and final thing is, of course, is there must be software in the operating system to drive the FM radios. And if it's not in the operating system, you can't just suddenly turn it on, because you would have to write that software and then deliver it as an over-the-air update. So there are four very sound reasons as to why there would be no FM radio in any iPhone for the last 5 to 10 years, that if ever, I don't think.
You see, also, I think Pi is kind of being slightly disingenuous about this, because his whole argument is, in the event of an emergency, an FM radio is a really useful thing. Well, yes, if you've got a dedicated, we've got in our Earthquake kit a hand crank FM radio, but if you're relying on your phone, whose battery life is probably not going to last more than about a day or so, and you've got no power to recharge it with, at the end of the day, it's just a very expensive doorstop after a day or so, and it doesn't help save people's lives. So rather than trying to mandate that, handset manufacturers have to include this functionality, give people a tax credit for buying emergency radios. Easiest way to solve this.
Yeah, I mean, that's ultimately, it's a little bit of a tempest in a teapot, because
it just happens also to be coming out at the very time.
You should probably have an AM and an FM radio, and you should probably have a standalone dedicated radio.
But he's also bringing this up at just the time when he's trying to ram through the killing of net neutrality. And this is a really good way of distracting from talking about those issues.
I remember being at the NAB show last year, and broadcasters were asking Apple and other phone companies to turn on those FM radios. There was there's been a move to do this even prior to Ajit Pai under the previous FCC commissioner.
Under Wheeler, huh?
However,
well, I mean that
if you can't do it, you can't do it.
If you're a government and you've got a citizenry who doesn't like to pay taxes, and you've got an existing system that's built around FM radios to deliver emergency information, what are you going to do? Are you going to go out and start building a new emergency system to notify people that something's gone wrong, and then you become dependent on your carriers, like the government gets screwed over by Verizon and AT&T even more than it currently is? So what you want to do is start saying, well, I need to use the existing stuff that's already bought and paid for. FM radio ultimately actually is very good for emergency. AM radio is actually much better. They'd be much better off saying, let's put AM radios in, because those transmitters go for hundreds and hundreds of miles.
Yeah, you're not going to put an AM radio on the phone.
It's relatively low power as well.
Yeah,
so that you can, you know, your phone will last an awful lot longer.
We do have, I mean, the good news is, and as Apple quite rightly points out, there are now emergency notification systems built into phones using text messaging and other
on Tuesday morning, everyone in our office's phones just started vibrating.
It's very annoying.
Yeah, they were warning us that it was going to be 85-degree temperatures.
I know, isn't that hysterical?
I have to say, people in Arizona were just like, what, you mean it's nighttime? You know,
it's hot.
So, I mean, the thing about FM AM is also moot, because the government has already recovered most of those frequencies and then resold them off to the carriers to use for LTE.
Yeah.
So the 700 megahertz range that AM was using, which is around television and stuff, has already been recovered, and now they're flogging it off for billions to the telephone companies. So it's a bit disingenuous to suddenly, you know, quite two-faced, really. I mean, there's a few things here. First of all, Ajit Pai is obviously an ignorant nut job, because this is fundamental technology. I was. Did you see that? I was really polite, I thought. Yeah. It's obviously kicking the Apple here in particular, or any of the phone companies, any of the handset makers, is an instant win, because anything he says, they can't exactly get on his case and make his life miserable. So he's really, you know, taking a shot at somebody who can't shoot back. And the fact that Apple's responded, I think, is actually quite interesting. And normally they would have just ignored him and gone, you're an ass. Why am I even listening to what you're saying? But what they've actually done is responded and just pointed out, you know, and like I said, 4 technical reasons that I believe. Any one of those 4 is a killer, but there's 4 quite reasons why there'll be no FM radio in any phone unless the government sits down and mandates them and makes it a condition. And that's not going to happen in the US with the current political climate. So,
all right. Everybody should go out and buy an AM radio you can crank.
Yeah, absolutely.
Crank generator and just, you know, you don't.
But you haven't made
the phone
one
is not a
yourself
good
with
place
crystal?
for that.
You haven't got a crystal radio and you've made it yourself?
Everybody has one of those. Yeah. I actually have an AM transmitter in the studio. I don't know what for. I know. 75 meters. I'm ready.
So in other words, when civilization breaks down with the next big earthquake, we're all coming up here and starting up the new United States.
Broadcasting from Petaluma. Let's see. What thoughts on this Bluetooth Wi-Fi issue in iOS 11? There is a button in iOS 11 in the control center, where you would quite logically look for it, to turn off the Bluetooth and Wi-Fi radio, except it doesn't. And even if it did, it only turns it off till next morning.
Apple knows best, Leo. Come on. Shame on you for thinking just because you bought a product, you should actually have any rights to saying how it works.
It's not a mistake. You can, by the way, go into settings and really.
Or you can
turn
put it in
off.
You can put it in airplane mode.
The really big issue is that there are good security reasons why you might wish to turn off Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. And if a company puts a button on their phone that says turn off Bluetooth or turn off Wi-Fi, that it should do that.
So if you force press the Wi-Fi button?
It'll open up the Wi-Fi settings.
Yes.
And then you can turn it off.
Yes. So now it actually shows you a much more detailed breakdown. The reason that the Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth stays active is because you might be using the Bluetooth as a hotspot, or you might be using it for an Apple Pencil.
But why have that button?
Right. So if you turn off Bluetooth, you're turning it off for connectivity, or maybe but you might want to keep it running. So if you're using Bluetooth to run your Hughes, for example, your home automation system, you might want to keep that local network connectivity running. So what they're
saying you're just too stupid to know why.
That seems to be.
You might want to leave this on. So we're just going to give you a dummy button that makes you feel
in more ways than one. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when you turn off Bluetooth, you probably didn't mean I actually don't want to airdrop photos to or I don't want my watch to talk to my smartphone, to my iPhone.
Maybe I did want it.
I was going to say, I turn off I almost never have Bluetooth on my phone, and I only have Wi-Fi on where I'm in a trusted network situation.
Because you know about bad guys. You go to DEF CON.
If you leave Bluetooth, I mean, I was at DerbyCon last weekend in Kentucky.
You're not going to leave your Bluetooth on.
Some of the things these guys can do with Bluetooth is just really kind of, you should have that stuff off and locked down as a matter of course, and only turn it on when you need it. Because, any kind of same with Wi-Fi up to a point, but Bluetooth, because of the complex nature of the Bluetooth stack and the amount of code that different manufacturers and different people in the SIG managed to cram in there, it's an incredibly unwieldy standard, riddled with security holes. So unless you absolutely have to have it on, shut it down. And also it saves on battery life.
Yeah.
Wow, that did not sound good.
Jesus.
I take it you're an iPhone user, Greg Farrow.
Well, I have the whole suite, the panoply of Apple stuff. Just literally because the idea of futzing with the technology just drives me nuts.
I like to futz. I'm a futzer.
I don't mind futzing, but when I've got stuff to do, let's just say that the idea of trying to make my Android talk to my Windows machine is just like a life-shortening experience. I just don't want to go through it anymore. So the idea here is that that the phone is going to do what most people would think it would do. I'm disconnecting from my Wi-Fi, but I might actually still want to talk to my watch. I'm not expecting my watch to suddenly stop working. So that's what they're trying to emulate. Unfortunately, they didn't communicate it very well. They should have done better icon design and usability to get that transition from the old to the new. But then again, what do you expect from Apple? Over the years, Apple's done all those things, consistently made decisions, and you've just had to suck it up.
Yeah.
So why are you whining about something that Apple's done consistently for 10 years?
Yeah, Apple knows best. What's the story with the watch now? The connectivity issue is kind of interesting on this new Series 3 watches with LTE. It turns out that I understand why this happened. I understand how this bug crept in. What I don't understand is why no one noticed it until they actually sold the product. But the problem is if you have a Wi-Fi, access point that uses a captive portal and you've already logged into it on your phone, and then you re-enter that place, let's say a Starbucks, minus your phone. The phone has the password. Your watch says, oh, I know this one. I can join it, and immediately loses all connectivity, including LTE, because it turns off the LTE radio to save battery. And the Wi-Fi is not actually connected to anything. So you walk into a Starbucks. It sounds like a joke. An Apple Watch walked into a Starbucks and lost all connectivity.
Yeah.
This is an easy thing to fix, obviously.
I'm just amazed they didn't pick it up in testing.
That's what I don't understand. Why did they not know about this? Why?
Have you guys ever built a Wi-Fi network with a portal in it?
No. This captive portal is a broken system anyway. It's a terrible idea.
Yeah. So there's a massive transition going on in Wi-Fi. Up until now, we've always used HTTP portals. That is, if you go to a web page, it's usually been HTTP, which is clear text, which has been very easy to intercept. You just capture it, you divert it off to somewhere else, and then you type in your username and password, or you hit the OK button, and away you go. And that means that if you're in the Apple Watch and you want to test, what you used to do is send out a web request, and then if the connectivity didn't work after that, you knew that there was a portal there. What we're seeing is a transition to TLS 1.3, the new HTTPS. The security standard is no longer HTTPS. It's directly called TLS 1.3. And if the portals are shifting, if you're trying to attach to an encrypted website for connectivity, then there's no way for the portals to appear. There's actually no way for a portal to be captured. There is a bunch of work going on in the IETF to try and get captive portals coming up, but it's not reliable to predict whether there's a captive portal in the Wi-Fi that you've just connected to. So you can't actually know easily or reliably whether you're all you can do is connect to the Wi-Fi, but are you connected to the internet? How do you test that? And at the moment, there's not a reliable test for that.
Oh, that's interesting. So my description of the bug is accurate. That's what's going on. Your phone knew about this access and had the password, had connectivity associated with it, but the watch with it minus the phone couldn't do anything with it.
Yeah. So if you go down to your favorite fast food junk store, and you log in with your appropriate details and so forth, then your phone has a cookie in here that's cached to say that you've signed up to fast food portal.
Right.
And next time you turn up there, your Wi-Fi connects and away you go. But your Apple Watch doesn't have the cookie.
Right.
So the details for the wireless for the watch come from the phone, right?
I'm thinking you could. Isn't there some? I mean, so the watch knows if there's a phone present or not. So a watch walks into a bar, sees Wi-Fi, tries to connect, knows though that at this point it doesn't have a phone next to it. So it's a potential problem. It can't test whether there's internet access or not. Should it just not join that Wi-Fi?
Pretty much.
Well, it's a legitimate Wi-Fi that your phone knows. It got a list of Wi-Fi that you have connected to.
Does the phone know, though, it was a captive portal as opposed to a standard WPA or password?
You should be able to sync that data across so that the phone knows what reliable networks are.
By the way, folks, if you're puzzled, as I am, what we're trying to do is figure out how hard it would be to fix this problem. We know the problem exists. How hard? Apple says it's working on a fix. It sounds like, Greg, you're saying this is actually pretty hard to fix.
So there are different ways for portals to work. If you've signed on to the portal, then it might have stored the MAC address of your phone and said this MAC address is allowed to go through.
Right.
It might have stored a cookie in your web browser.
I see.
It might have cached some other. This is quite complex, so I'm going to keep it fairly simple. There are many different ways of storing some sort of credentials to say, yes, you've been to the junk shop, junk food restaurant, shall we call it, and you've signed up to the Wi-Fi and passed it all, and they're going to cache that for a month or so before they force you to re-log in. Well, your iWatch, your Apple Watch, connects to the Wi-Fi preferred because it doesn't want to use bandwidth over the LTE, and it connects to the portal quite blindly, thinking this is a perfectly legitimate Wi-Fi network, but it doesn't have any of the validation that you would see.
So it's unusable.
That the phone can have.
It turns, and in the process, it's turned off LTE. And now it has no connectivity at all.
It prefers.
Does that mean your Series 3 watch, every time you walk into somewhere with a captive portal Wi-Fi setup, is going to fail, and there's nothing we could do about it?
I imagine that Apple's going to put a post connect validation. They'll probably set up an apple.com web server.
Well, they do now, by the way. When you get a captive portal, you go to captive.apple.com. Apple actually
just resolves,
actually does that work for you. It's such a the captive portal system is such a broken system.
Yeah.
But it's what we live with, and it's everywhere. That's why it's a matter of concern, because you leave your phone behind, which is the promise of the Series 3 LTE watch. You should be able to do stuff with it. All of a sudden,
it's balked.
You walk somewhere, and it's not working anymore.
So there is a working group in the IETF working on captive portals. I did a podcast with them, I think, about it's published somewhere in the packet pushes. We publish 4 shows a week, so there's an awful lot of them. It's still very early days. They're working on it. Yeah. There are some answers, but they're very arcane. And because of the way that TLS 1.3 is built so that nobody can man in the middle it, it's very difficult to suddenly do a captive portal. Yeah. So you would understand the theory behind TLS 1.3. So all of a sudden to say I've got to capture that and divert it to a captive portal requires some really deep cryptographic changes, and that's going to take several months, maybe years of work to get it sorted.
On our vacation, we were using the Wi-Fi on this riverboat, and in order to use it, it was some kind of captive portal system. But in order to use it, you would attach to the Wi-Fi, and then a page would come up with a QR code, and then you had to go to the front desk, and they would scan the QR code, and it was per device, by the way.
This sounds like something the French would do.
And at that point, they set a cookie, or they did a MAC address or something, and I think it was a Swiss company. Even
right,
better.
Okay, the nice Germans, right? Okay,
and then you would be you're okay, and you can use that, and you can use that Wi-Fi. That seemed like a good system.
At a guess, at a guess, what they're doing there, the QR code's picking up the MAC address of your Wi-Fi, and by scanning,
and they're registering the MAC address. That makes sense.
Yeah, so you know how there's like 8 hexadecimal characters, 16 hexadecimal characters.
For a QR code,
Yeah, and then the front desk can just scan that, and then the MAC address goes into a database and says this MAC address is permitted for 24 hours.
Now, that's easy to fix, though, because you could spoof MAC addresses like nobody's business. That's a simple thing to handle.
Yeah, but the risk profile is very low. You're only holding it for a day. You're on a boat. You're in the middle of a river. You're in blah, blah.
You're busy drinking wine, eating sausage. You got no time for the internet. I got no time for that.
For all the
You just want to
dissing-
send some Instagrams. You know?
for all the dissing on this, the watch, the new version of the watch does have something which is really quite interesting. In that, at last, Apple has embraced the Qi wireless charging standard, because in the past it's always used wireless charging pads.
It was inductive charging.
Yeah, but it was the Qi standard, but they buggered around with the firmware, so
That's right, I
it would
remember, 'cause,
only
yeah,
work with Apple products.
I could use a Qi device. I couldn't remember. It went one way, but not the other.
You couldn't charge an Apple wireless charging device on a Qi standard charger, and now you can. They finally embraced the
Hallelujah,
standard.
because now there is a standard. And there were competing standards. There's Power Mat and other stuff. So just by virtue of the new iPhones and the new watches supporting Qi, makes Qi it. That's good news.
Yeah, I mean, it's already on 90% of the wireless charging
It's funny
products
because
out
Apple
there,
doesn't even
so-
make a Qi charger yet.
No. Well, no, it
So
does.
you have to go buy a Belkin.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, no, but
So-
yeah.
It worked, but this
So,
works with
somebody
everything.
was
It
on
works with
Twitter-
all my Qi chargers. It's
Yeah. But somebody was on Twitter this week saying that every time the phone vibrates, it actually rotates off the Qi charger. Because the Qi charger is actually, you've got to be just so.
You have to be just so. I use
You have to
a charger from Tilt that is a easel.
Yeah, same
It's
as me.
very nice, and it works perfectly, and it doesn't fall off. It doesn't vibrate off.
No, I got one of those for my Nexus, and then
great.
Google stripped wireless charging out of the Pixel.
I know that drives me
And
crazy. Well, let's take a break and talk about what we expect Google will announce on Wednesday. I'm excited. And then sadly, October 4th was also the day Sonos said we're going to make some announcements, but I don't think anybody's going to.
Nah.
They're not going to pay attention. It's not quite as bad as doing your announcements on Apple Day.
No,
But it's almost.
Although a couple of companies did use Apple Day to bury some bad news.
That's
which
how you
was-
bury bad news.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Apple Day. Did you go to the spaceship?
Oh, are you kidding? We've been blacklisted by Apple for
Oh,
the
okay.
last
Me too.
decade.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's, we had one of our journalists actually did a piece a couple of months ago where he applied to go to an Apple event 7 months in advance, and then we just printed out all the emails and the responses that we get from Apple.
No.
And just trying to
No.
get them to admit
No.
a blacklist exists, and they're never going to do it. But I highly recommend you read that. It's one of the few articles which will literally have people crying with laughter, as long as you're not Apple's PR, that is. You know?
We'll take a break. Greg Farrow from packetpushers.net. That's the right address, right? Yeah, I see it right behind you. Packetpushers.net. You've got one of those little signs churches have. You need a little.
Yes, I know.
You need a little. You got a lot of little statements there, little bomos, epigrams. Trust me, you can dance, says beer. I think
We'll
you
have to
should
try it
have
out
every
one
time we come back from a commercial, have something different on that little sign behind you. Just, you know.
I had this massive passion that I would actually have lots and lots of different things to hang up there.
Yeah.
And then I got all those hung up, and then guess what?
No room. What?
I just stopped. It was
stopped.
fixed. I just
Yeah.
stopped.
You stopped.
So one day I'm going to get out. I designed all these myself and got them all printed.
Oh, neat.
So, yes.
So do
So I
more
wanted to-
of, I can't tell because your head's in front of it. Do more of what makes you
love.
happy. I like
Yep.
that. Yes. Dream big. Oh, these are affirmative, positive messages.
Well, a little bit.
If winning makes losers, why play?
Yes.
Well, I have to think of that one. Think about that.
Yeah, that's my anti-corporate rant.
Winning makes losers.
One of the things about
You don't like the
working for
NFL
large-
either, do you?
I prefer
I'm not a big
Eagles,
fan
but-
of large corporations, and one of the things is they always took it and say, like, executives are like, crush the opposition and kill the opposition. Go, no, no. And I'm going like, you do realize that every time you win, someone loses, and so every time you lose a deal, you're a loser. You know that you're not a winner, and they go like,
Nope, capitalism is not a zero-sum
Yeah.
game.
Well, my
I
favorite
love upsetting them.
My favorite came from a Microsoft engineer who just had on his wall, "Eagles may soar, but weasels seldom get sucked into jet engines." And it's just like, you know.
Or my favorite, 3 turkeys doesn't make an eagle. No, is that
Okay.
yeah.
Hadn't heard that one.
Actually, I don't think I have either. I think that just came to me. Again,
You just gave me
I
this
haven't had a
now,
lot of
haven't you?
sleep. Our show today brought to you by My Mattress. Man, oh man. You know what I have to say? Traveling's nice. One of the things I like about traveling is it's great to get home, isn't it? With your
Oh
bed.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And
Oh
when-
yeah.
Oh man, that was the best feeling. We got home on Friday evening, and I'm just thinking, I can't wait to lie down on my Casper. Yes. And it was a great feeling until about 2 in the morning when my eyes are like, boom, because it's daytime in France. Boom.
You're missing the wine?
I was missing the wine. I need another bottle. Casper makes these great mattresses, designed and made in the United States by a team of 20 engineers and perfected by a community of, well, now it's 500,000, nearly 500,000 sleepers. I love this. I'm one of them. Obsessive engineering makes a great mattress. Not just the Casper, but the new Casper Wave, which features a natural geometry support system and a new top layer. I've got the Casper Wave in my house, the box.
Okay.
I was so tired, I just went to bed.
You just slept on the box.
I slept on the box. But I will open it I will probably open it tonight and let you know how it is. Casper mattresses delivered to your door, and it's a surprisingly compact box. We have a king mattress in a box. Well, actually, we had that video. You've seen it, where we open up the box. It just whoosh, it opens up. It smells great. You don't have to air it out. And by the way, I've had mattresses where you couldn't really sleep on them for a couple of weeks. You had to let them breathe.
Yeah.
Not the Casper. I don't know what they do. They do something magical, but that's the Casper team. They're a bunch of engineering nerds digging into the science of sleep and technology to give you an amazing mattress that delivers pressure-relieving, supportive memory foam with a breathable open cell layer for all-night comfort. That's one of the things I missed. I just love it, how cool sleeping the Casper is. Casper was named Fast Company's most innovative brand of 2017. Free shipping to the U.S., Canada, and now the U.K. I also should point out that there's free returns, too, and this is really important. I know a lot of people are reluctant to buy a mattress without lying on it first. But Casper gets its prices so low because it doesn't have that, network of middle people who double, triple, quadruple the cost of the mattress. That's how they keep the cost low. So they don't have those showrooms. Actually, I think they have one in New York. They have a couple of them, but most people don't get to lie on it. But don't worry, you've got a 100-day trial period. That means you can sleep on that mattress for more than 3 months. And even then, you can say, yeah, maybe not. And they'll come, they'll get it. They will pay you back every penny. You will at absolutely no cost to you. Free shipping, free returns. So there is no risk here. I guarantee you, though, you're going to love this mattress. Considering you spend a third of your life lying on it, it's important that you have one you love. That's why Casper gives you 100 nights to try their mattress out. And look at the reviews. I mean, seriously, and I get email all the time from people who say, thank you. I love this mattress, and man, is it affordable. Want to know more? Dive deeper into the science behind the perfect mattress and get $50 starts any mattress purchase at Casper.com/twit. Enter the promo code TWIT. That's Casper.com/twit. Promo code TWIT. Terms and conditions apply. I have Casper pillows. Casper dog. They make dog beds. They're really nice.
You said a Casper dog then for a second. I thought that really is branching out to new areas. I need a Casper dog.
Actually, our dog passed away, so I don't have the Casper.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I know. I don't have the Casper bed anymore. But, yeah, it was nice for Ozzy. Casper.com, CASPER.com/twit. Okay. What are we going to get here with this new Pixel? I am actually excited. There are a number of phones I'm very interested in. Of course, the iPhone 8. The Essential phone was very exciting till I got it. Well, it's not bad, except the camera is just broken. I launched the camera app, and I thought, oh, they must have fixed it by now. They took long enough to get it out to me. They shipped it. And it immediately rebooted the phone. The next time it just froze it, so they're getting better.
Yeah, although I've had...
It's on my desk, John. Would you? The Essential, it's not in this box. He brought me the box, and I opened it up, and it's gone. I think it's on my desk.
Although
it's very pretty.
But are you running Oreo on any of your phones at the moment?
Yeah, I'm running Oreo on my Pixel.
Because I know I'm running it on my Pixel, and I'm getting a reboot about once every 2 days, spontaneous reboot,
not on my
and
Pixel
it's kind of
XL.
like I can't work out whether it's a third-party app or whether.
Actually, that's a feature on Samsung phones. There's a setting, I kid you not, to reboot every night. Because
okay,
you know why, right? Because it'll crash if you don't. So, and I turned that on. Reboot every night.
And how much did you pay for that experience?
Oh, not $830. Why? It doesn't when I'm asleep. All right.
How the hell can you pay $830 for a faulty product? and then smile and tell me that it's actually okay.
Hey, Windows 95, you had to reboot every day. What's the big deal?
Yeah, but
there's a
didn't
reason why we remember Windows 95 as a really lousy operating system.
Do you think that's an Android flaw or a Samsung flaw?
Windows 95 was still a hell of a lot better than Linux or PicOS or a whole bunch like
Those
Linux,
fighting words, Greg, and I'm not going to take them. You know,
all the operating systems of the days, they were a hell of a lot worse.
The Essential phone has the notch too, and I have to say, even though it's a teeny weeny notch, I don't like it, and I'm really I'm worried about this notch in the iPhone 10, which is big. A big notch. Why put a notch in? Why? And then you can see why not. I know I don't believe it was dropped, but there's a crack right there in the glass. This is supposed to be titanium and ceramic. Anyway, not selling that well. That's the Essential phone. So then the Note 8 comes. I'm excited. It's got a stylus. It reboots every night, just like it's supposed to. It's
must control fist of death.
you know, it's got a beautiful screen.
But how often do you actually use the stylus?
Never.
I'm genuinely
absolutely never. But if I ever were to go to a bar and want to get a young lady's phone number, I could just, instead of putting it on a soggy napkin, I could just whip out my Note 8.
I don't know what kind of bars you're going to, mate.
Pen and say, would you mind giving me your phone? No, never have.
Well, you really need to have... Your teenage children mustn't have taught you exactly how they do it these days. It's called AirDrop or texting.
Or Tinder.
Why would you... Yeah. If you're going to swap phone numbers, it's not going to be using a stylus.
It's a fantasy. It's not.
In fairness, back when I was growing up, it was lipstick on the chest. You know, the number was...
Oh, I like that. That's very, very romantic.
There was a really unfortunate trend in London for a while of people using the receipt slips from their ATM. And what they would do is chuck a load of money into their account, print off ending receipt slips.
Yes, I have $80,000
transfer it back to savings, and then here's my number. And the minute they turn over, he's got a lot of money in his account.
Yeah, he's a rich bloke. Then we got the iPhone 8 Plus. I got the white or silver, I guess it is.
It's okay, but it's a bit meh, you know.
It's meh. It's just like this. I liked it. It's a good camera. It's very much like the 7 Plus, like the wireless charging. Glass back. That's going to break right away.
Yeah,
right? Going to break right away. But I'm still waiting. I'm interested in the LG V30. Good reports of that. They have a fingerprint sensor and they put it in a sensible spot, right in the back in the middle, like
same as the Pixel. Yeah.
It has a headphone jack, I believe. I am going to be very mad if the Pixel 2 does not have a headphone jack.
I'm going to be furious, particularly if they can't justify it, because one of the reasons I want to go to this is to get
courage.
I have not yet had a reliable answer as to why the jack has to go. You know?
Well, that's my point. If you can put a jack in a Note 8, which is jammed with technology, and there's enough real estate to put a jack in there, why can't Apple?
I know.
Two reasons.
Okay.
Waterproof. You can't hit IP68.
This is IP68. This is IP68.
Yeah, sure.
Well,
flush it down drop it in a bucket of water. Let's see how it's going to go. I mean, it already doesn't work. You might as well drop it in a bucket of water.
It works. It reboots every night on purpose.
That's faulty as far as I'm concerned, right? And the second thing is that actually the structural integrity, because of the way these things work. Have you ever looked at the inside of the structural integrity? So the steel band that goes around the outside is actually the load bearer. There's a bunch of other load bearing things inside of here, but the actual jack where it goes through that thing actually becomes a weak point, and the phones often fracture around that. And getting rid of it actually simplifies the construction of the phone.
Yeah, but
reduces costs.
I like headphones. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you've got an enormous use base of headphones out there that use.
Sorry, there's some whining noise. I've got this whining noise in my ears.
All right. So you're of the opinion. Do you think all connectors? I mean, that's got to be the same problem for a Type C charger or a Lightning charger. You think all connectors are going to be gone? Is that
that's why the Lightning charger is thin, so that your structural integrity can be maintained. So there's enough material around the outside of that. Around the outside of it so that the strength can be maintained. And the Lightning connector was designed in such a way that you can actually waterproof what goes inside. Now, that's not to say that you can't do it at some level, but the physical depth, like you're asking for a 3.5mm jack with a TRRS, you're actually asking for this much space inside of the phone, right? And when you break the outside of this thing, like just getting the speakers in is okay because all you're doing is emptying out drilling small holes in the stainless steel outer rim. But it does make a big difference to the manufacturing and the structural integrity of the device.
Wow,
And
that's the
nobody seems
first
to-
compelling
I was
argument. I
gonna
don't know
say,
why
that
Apple
actually-
has not said that, because that's the first compelling argument I've heard. They said
That's
we
'cause
needed
people
the
are-
space. That's what they said.
Yeah, that's the problem, guy, having people who've got liberal arts degrees writing about technology. Is they're all idiots.
But also, coming back to your waterproof point, it's not a really big selling point for most Apple buyers. And also, and I'm going to play devil's advocate here, if you drop your phone into a bucket of water, you deserve to lose the bloody thing. It's just like...
So you've never walked, gotten rained on and then had your phone ruined because it got wet in your pocket? Like you had to walk through the rain for 30 minutes? So you've never lived in a tropical country like, say, Australia or Philippines?
I'm
or
from Britain, okay? And it's then I moved to California, which has pretty much the same weather in the Bay Area. So
all right. So
afraid
apparently
not.
your personal experience is a representative of the entire global population.
No, we've got about
Sorry, no,
5-6
just what
million
you just said.
readers a
You
year.
just told me that you've never had this problem.
No,
And you infer from your experience that nobody else ever has.
No, not at all, because I teach sailing in the Bay, and a lot of people take their phones out there, and even those people are saying, I'm not trusting a manufacturer's waterproof racing, I'm getting a waterproof case.
Well, actually, that's the truth.
Excellent.
Just as you were saying, Greg, about the so-called IP68 rating, which I have no reason not to believe on the Note 8, you're still not going to take a chance, are you?
No, you get a
No, you
waterproof
get a
case for
waterproof
it.
case.
They're not waterproof down to 30 meters. That they never have been.
If your
The
phone
point
is going
that
down to 30 meters, it's buggered
How are
anyway.
you going to get it back?
You know,
You're going to get
it's
a
like-
bell diving helmet on? And I'm going
The
down
idea
to
is
get
that
my
your
phone.
should be able to sit in your pocket
Give
and
me
you get
the
wet in the
nitrogen
rain
mix.
for an hour, and it'll survive. That's the point of the IP16 rating. So,
I know it's down here somewhere.
and you know what? That's what happens to real people sitting at bus stops waiting for buses to come by and pick them up and take them to work. Which brings me on to my point. Have you seen Google's new connected jacket?
Yeah, that you
Just
can only
most
wash
retarded.
10 times.
Oh, it's the most pathetically useless waste of technology I've seen in years.
$350. Well, it's a proof of concept.
No, I think it's... Honestly, if I saw somebody wearing one of those jackets, it would be immensely useful because you know they've got, A, more money than sense, no fashion style,
Nobody's
and
going
they're
to
an easy
zero.
mark.
Fewer people are going to
not
buy
meant
this
to
than
buy.
the essential phone.
I don't actually think this is actually meant to sell.
No, it's
I think
not.
this is one of those, it's meant to suck in all the idiots, the liberal arts degree people who write at various media sites around the world, as if because they can understand it, right?
So this
it's
is
a jacket.
yeah.
It's got
This is
leather.
Google's. Is this their Thread technology? Or no, it's Jacquard. It's a connected apparel platform,
For goodness sake.
and it's. I guess you. What do you do with it? Why is it connected? There's buttons on the jacket that you can.
There's a couple of
fast
buttons,
forward
and
your
there's,
iPod?
What they've done is put some threads in the cuff, and if you swipe down across the threads, they electrostatically pick up your fingers. And certain of these actions can be translated via an app on your phone to do things like play music, fast forward, rewind, answer
And
a
this
call,
is
reject
better.
a call.
Why?
It's not. It's stupid.
This is clearly a technology in search of a problem.
Yeah,
No,
I only
but-
mention it because it's so stupid that we should just say it's stupid and move right along.
It's $350, and you can only watch it 10 times, and then
And then it
on
stops
time
working.
11 it stops working.
But it's, I mean, we've had so much. We had at CES, they had an internet connected hairbrush, which would monitor the number of strokes saying, let you know
99,
whether your hair
100.
was wet or dry, as though you didn't have a mirror in front of you when you were
But
doing
isn't this
this.
the way it is, that you've got to try all these things and see what... Well, here, look, for example, at Amazon, which announced a variety of Echo devices this week.
Yes.
Which it really looks like they're just throwing crap at the wall to see what sticks. It doesn't...
Quite
there's a-
literally in this case.
Yeah,
Yes.
there's a 30...
literally, yeah.
Yeah, there's a...
Have you seen Amazon's website? It looks exactly like somebody threw stuff at the wall.
So we've got
Website is ugly.
the Echo Spot, which on the surface looks like a good idea. It's kind of round and adorable. It's an alarm clock. It's a screen. You put it by your bed. You know what time to get up, what the weather's going to be like. You can listen to music. And how handy, it has a camera in it.
Yeah, because that's what I really want overlooking my bed. You know, it's just particularly with the kind of lousy technology that these things, the lousy security technology these things have in. It just, you know,
What? Why is the camera in there? Did they say? I was away when this announcement came out.
it's a feature. You know, we can't question.
Do you think? I mean, do you think they're really kind of nefarious and they just really want to put cameras everywhere so they can they're not going to spy on you, but they can understand what you wear,
a low-cost add-on that you can put in there, make people think that you're getting more for your money.
I ordered one.
And, immediately. 9 times out of 10, the security on these things is disastrously bad.
We don't know, we should say, of any issues with people
with this particular camera.
Turning on the camera.
Last weekend, I was in a presentation being given at the DerbyCon hacking conference, and there's like just one manufacturer has spaffed out 1 million IP connected cameras.
A lot of these cameras are terrible,
trivially easy to hack.
Yeah,
it just takes a couple of packets, and that's it. You're in. So
ironically, this was the best product. That Amazon announced. They also announced a product I don't understand at all, a $35 box called the Echo Connect that turns your Echo into a landline phone, but it requires, guess what? A landline jack.
Yeah.
So as far as I can tell, it's a speakerphone.
I should imagine the planning meeting was held in a pub or something, because that's the only way you can get that.
It's got a jack on the back, and it's an RJ45, or is it RJ11? It's RJ11, right?
RJ11.
That you plug into the phone line.
So I think what's happening here is that Amazon's, throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks.
Yeah.
What you also need to know is that Amazon has a service called Chime, which is a Slack type functionality. And they also have another one, which is a unified communications, which is an IP telephony service. So first of all, you get these boxes into people's homes, you give them video cameras and speakers, then you play music on them, then you get them used to having video cameras wherever they are. You get them to start using these for telephone calls to communicate over Echo, and then Amazon can come back to a smartphone and maybe round that out. So there's a few different agendas going on here. One, if you can get them connected to the landline, you can get them to start using an Amazon service, IP telephony service, instead of using the landline.
Well,
and
they did turn that feature on as well, that you can call a phone directly from your Amazon Echo, giving it parity, sort of, with the Google Home.
But only in the US, where the telco rules are set up. And because in the US, the way that it works is the caller and the receiver both pays for the call. So that means that in the US, it's possible for Amazon to make money by calling people.
What?
Yeah. So they actually get a.
So it's a profit deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. If they make a call, then they get money out of that.
Wow.
So that's how all of the free conferencing services in the US work, because everybody calls in to the conferencing service, and they make money out of by charging you to call into their service just from the telephone call.
They also announced the Echo button.
Yeah.
They're hockey puck-shaped devices that cost $20, and they have colors, and they light up. It kind of looks like the Staples Easy button.
Yeah.
But it does something.
What
does it do?
The big weakness with these devices is that they have to be slaved off a full Echo. So you can't just use them alone.
It's a big strength from Amazon's perspective.
But what am I going to... So all Amazon says, well, you could play trivia games with it.
Great.
Yeah.
We have a toddler next door who can do that as well, and doesn't cost 20 quid.
It doesn't feel like there's a unified strategy here, but maybe you've come up with one, Greg. They just want to have sensors everywhere in your environment.
Yeah, I think what they're doing is trying to immunize the customer base to get used to the fact that there's an Echo everywhere, that you could talk to your Alexa thing. Yeah, okay.
You've played with these. Both of you have. This is the buttons we use for the trivia game.
Of course.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
The Game of Geeks. It looks exactly... In fact, it's indistinguishable from an Echo Spot.
It's the same company.
Probably the same whitelist manufacturer,
It's the Me First game show buzzer.
Yes. So I think they're immunizing the customer base about having these in the house, that you talk to an Echo wherever it might be, where there's an Echo in the wherever.
I love it. I don't want to live without. I missed Echo.
I refuse to have them in the house.
I have them everywhere.
Where do you stand on Greg? Because we've got full-time user, complete boycott. Where are you on this?
If I could get Siri to actually answer a query intelligently, I might actually use it.
Why would you prefer Siri if it doesn't work?
I don't prefer Siri.
Oh,
I just don't like them. I'm not a big fan of the speaky things. I'd much rather.
You'd rather have an Apple. You trust Apple, but you don't trust Amazon? Or
I do like Apple's privacy policy. So they're very upfront about the fact that we don't keep your data infinitely, whereas Amazon absolutely is mining everything that I ask them or would send to them to haul products at me and make me spend more money with them and laugh.
I'm curious, do you really think that Apple's not data mining you?
I believe that at a fundamental level they're not. That doesn't mean that they're not extracting data about you at various levels, but they're not doing it to the extreme that Google, Amazon, Facebook are.
Boy, I mean, I have no evidence one or the other, but I find that hard to believe.
I don't know. I think that does make a level of extent simply because they wouldn't get as much value out of it as Amazon or Google would.
Right, that's true.
But I am finding, particularly with Google and the later builds of Android, they're getting really, really pushy about the amount of data that not only are they taking, but which they're pushing out to you.
But that's one of the reasons, there's many, but that's one of the reasons Siri is less functional. Because they don't know anything.
They have less context and they have to train. Right. So they're not keeping the training data.
They also have less training, right? They have less information.
Right.
Yeah.
But Apple's been, so for example, with FaceTime in the iPhone 10 that's shipping, the face data never leaves the phone. So they're not shipping that up to the cloud and storing it and analyzing it to improve FaceTime. The FaceTime data never leaves the phone.
Yeah, they said that, and I'm glad because that's kind of a requirement. We just learned that Russia has decided to use face recognition on all of its many thousands of cameras all over
UK
Moscow.
Government's been trialing it as well with very poor results. But
face recognition is a solved problem, isn't it? I mean, no.
We've got a ways to go.
Oh, I thought they were pretty good at it.
It's about 90% accurate today, getting up.
Yeah.
They're starting to get up
false positive. When the false positive leads to getting cuffed and thrown in the back of a van.
Well, that's a good point.
It's kind of
you kind of want to be 100% accurate. In a case
but the way they see it is that starting at 90% accuracy and iterating over the next 5 to 10 years.
And it's better than a human.
That's right.
What they've been doing now is you have humans looking at these screens going, I think I recognize him. I don't know. Maybe. It looks like Greg Sergio. I don't know.
Is that you, Sergey?
It's Sergey. Hey.
No, you should try
I think it's you.
One of the best airport security systems in the world is in Israel because they've had that much practice. And they don't go on facial recognition. They don't go on biometrics. But by the time you get from the airport door to the plane, you will have met 2 or 3 people who are trained to look for body language signals that you are under stress or that there is something going on there. And it works. There's a reason why Israeli flights don't get hijacked because they take it seriously and they don't look for a tech fix.
We got the dreaded SSSS on our tickets as we were leaving Heathrow for the United States. And that
welcome
means
to the shoulder marigolds.
You've been selected for a secondary security search. Which means so
that process really works then, does it? That's great.
Yeah, well,
I'm just joking. I'm just
the 8 of us who were selected were sitting here going, huh? But it's funny because the Brits who were doing it said, yeah, the Yanks are making us do this. They didn't care. Yeah. We got to do this for America. And
for freedom.
Freedom. And I was very proud because one of the other passengers said, yeah, security theater. I thought, well, the message is getting through.
It is. It is.
The message is getting through. Amazon has a new Echo Plus. God, they just were busy. That looks a lot like the HomePod, Apple's competing device. And what a surprise. Is lower cost, of course.
Yeah, I mean, $99. Amazon's done a lot to drive this market. It's a logical step for them, but it just, how many of these things do you have in your house?
How about this? Do you want Alexa in your BMW? You will, starting next year.
Yeah, there are many, many more reasons to buy a BMW than Alexa. It's got engineering.
If you get Android Auto or Apple's CarPlay in your car, and many cars now are supporting this, don't you get the voice assistant that goes with the respective platforms, or no? You can't use Siri on CarPlay?
If I'm spending $70,000 on a car, it had better have more than Alexa in it. There'd better be a car in there.
That's an expensive...
I know, but I mean, you buy a BMW for the engineering. I test drove the latest Ford Mustang recently, and it had build quality that would make a BMW's engineer's fists itch. I mean, the door panels weren't aligned properly. The acceleration was ludicrous, but it couldn't corner for anything. There are reasons you buy a BMW, and I'm not sold on Alexa is going to be a major...
Are you a BMW fan? I think you are.
I grew up with them, yes. And if I could afford one now, I don't. But
slight bias.
I went instead for the economy version and bought a Prius, which is... Yeah.
We were excited about. I'm not that excited, but now that I'm seeing the reviews, I'm getting excited about Blade Runner 2049.
The reviews are great.
The reviews are really good. I thought Ryan Gosling, this is a bad
So exciting. So exciting.
Okay.
Have you seen all the shorts? And then they've released a bunch of the directors talking about it. There's a pre-short with Jared Leto lining up the transition from the previous movie to the new one. And then there was a 15-minute anime released this week padding out more of the storyline about what happened in the gap between the two movies. So if you're a real Blade Runner fan, get out there onto the YouTube of Warner Brothers and watch them all.
And apparently
you'll be just like so excited.
Yeah,
Very
watch
excited.
it on the biggest screen possible, apparently. All the reviews I'm seeing are saying basically it's such a visually stunning film that you want to get really, really big screen.
But Ryan Gosling.
Yeah.
He's not that bad.
Yes, he is. Look at him. It's as bad as Keanu Reeves. It's okay.
I know Kung Fu.
Yeah. Whoa.
Like the shorts that we've seen. I mean, just look at
Are
the
you
coloring.
Replicant Man? Oh, dude. Oh, is that Jared Leto?
Yeah.
It's creepy.
But
Yeah,
for
he
once they're going to do a reboot which doesn't take a massive dump on my childhood, and I'm ecstatic about this.
Yeah.
If it's good, then fine, because after what they've been doing with the Alien franchise, and let's not mention Star Wars, there was only the original 3 films, nothing else matters.
You guys Star Trek Discovery fans?
I haven't seen it yet.
I'm not going to get. I don't want to get hooked because I don't want to pay CBS whatever it costs to get CBS All Access.
Yeah, I think it was on his
You have
trailer.
to buy it.
Yes, to boldly stream that no
Except
person
for you,
has ever
Greg.
wanted to stream
You
before.
can boldly stream it on Netflix in the UK.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh. That sounds like a thing.
To boldly stream where no man has streamed before. It sounds like
Yeah. Star
something
Trek.
that happens behind a bar.
So-
I don't.
So exciting. Star Trek.
All right, this is the one that excites me. Amazon, back to Amazon.
Good thing we're not here in the same studio, mate. 'Cause otherwise,
Fist fight. They're going to make a TV show based on one of my favorite sci-fi novels, Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash. How about that?
it's either going to go reasonably well or catastrophically badly. And I love that book.
Oh.
Now, and don't get me wrong.
Great book.
It's good for serialization as well because Neil Stephenson can't do endings for toffee.
I know. It's such a funny thing. I agree with you. This has the best first chapter of any book I've ever read since The Tale of Two Cities. But it has the worst ending.
Oh,
it just
I know.
tapers off.
It's just dire, but you know.
But everybody should read it because the
Yeah.
metaverse described in Snow Crash is really, I think, powering all of this AR, VR nonsense. Is people are trying to recreate, and I wish they would. I'm ready to plug it into the back of my brain and go into, you know, a
Hey, I'd
virtual space.
get wetware as long as it's proved
Wetware.
right. But
Yeah,
I mean,
that's what I
the
want.
Snow Crash was, you're right, it was a very pivotal book, particularly in terms of how Silicon Valley saw these things. You know, there were reports of, you know, somebody coming into a VC's office, throwing down a copy of Snow Crash and saying, that's our business plan, which is probably a good idea not to fund them, but still. But it's a really great book. It starts off
Read
strong.
it.
It's got
Read
lots
it.
of plot. The
The
ending.
first chapter. Just read the first chapter.
Yeah.
Pizza delivery girl on a skateboard.
Yeah.
Great chapter. It moves.
But
All right.
unfortunately, Hollywood has a way of mucking
know.
up science fiction.
Well, it's always been my opinion. Science fiction is always better when you're reading it because you have a much higher budget in your brain than any Hollywood spectacular, right?
Yeah.
It's much harder to create this for real than what you see in your mind. Let's take a break, come back. There's lots more to talk about, including, is it all over for Silicon Valley? Greg Farrow wants to talk about this. Is the end of the
Oh,
line.
I sure do.
It's
Oh,
the
yes,
end
I
of the line for Silicon Valley, as some say.
They might have to pay tax.
Yeah, good luck on that.
Greg Farrow's here. The Packet Pushers Net. You got to listen to the Packet Pushers podcast. They're fabulous. Ethereal Mind on the Twitter, which is, I guess, a play on Ethernet and the Ethereum, or I don't know. What is it?
Well, you know, back in the day, ethereal, the idea was that there was a spiritual aspect to the being ethereal and the mind. So it was meant to be spiritual mind.
Ah.
And then it was a double
I like
play
that.
on words because there used to be a thing called ethereal, which was a packet sniffer. So I'm a
Yes.
computer
yeah.
network engineer.
Oh, I get it.
And so it was sort of meant to be a play between spiritual mind and packet brain. And somewhere along the line, I've long since forgotten which one of those it is, and now it's just become a handle.
That's the problem with handles.
Yeah.
Their
Yeah.
genesis is so far in the past that now it's just a random set of letters. What is your handle, Ian?
Oh,
Like on if you were in an IRC or
my IRC.
hacker. What's your hacker name?
I'm not sure I should say that because it might appear in various things, and I'm here at as a guest of Homeland Security.
But that's fine. Just stop right now.
I would say basically I change my handle about once every 10 years.
So this is actually germane because Marcus Hutchins.
Yes.
And we talked about this. You were very upset when this happened. And actually, we haven't kind of circled around on it. He is the security researcher who stopped
The
WannaCry in its tracks. It is somewhat suspiciously, he happened to know. While I was reading the code, I figured it out how to stop it.
Well, basically,
How to
he found
trigger the.
Well, no. What he found was that they were using a particular domain as their command to host their command and control servers, but they hadn't registered that domain.
Registered it
So he just spent 10
once
quid,
registered,
took that domain over,
it stopped
and
WannaCry.
it stopped it dead in its tracks.
Yeah. It was a kill switch built into WannaCry, apparently, which I think is a little suspicious that he says.
It's
I think he might have been suspicious that he knew it. In any event, he was arrested. He was out here for. Was he out here for DEF CON?
He came out for DEF CON Black Hat, yeah.
And he was going to go back, and as he's about to board the plane, which is where they always arrest people on the way home, because it's easy to get them.
You've
in
got
an
lots
airport.
of armed guards around. Yeah. It's a lockdown environment.
He's arrested, thrown into jail. Department of Justice accuses him of hacking crimes. Kind of. Have we seen the indictment yet?
A lot of it is redacted. Basically,
so we don't know the details.
They say they have evidence and that he was behind the manufacture and sale of the Kronos banking malware. And then said that when they arrested him, he was held for 24 hours without access to any outside legal counsel. And they've also said that during that time, he admitted it to them.
That would be illegal.
He, of course, is denying this completely, and it's a really weird case because when he was put out on bail, usually with stuff like this, if you're out on bail for computer crimes, one of the key things they say is you cannot touch a computer. And the only restrictions, I mean, he can use a computer, he just can't access the servers that he was using for malware research. He's got to wear a GPS cuff on his leg, but other than that, he's fine to get on computers. He's fine to,
Did you read Brian Krebs' article in which he kind of implies that Marcus Hutchins had a change of heart, that he was, in fact, a teenage hacker, a malware creator. And then as he aged, as many of us do, he thought better of it. He had a change of heart. And it's these earlier crimes when he was 15 years old.
Well, I read Krebs' article and he kind of puts 2 and 2 together and makes 222. There's an awful lot of inference there, but no direct proof. And let's face it, it wouldn't be the first time that had happened. Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak.
They sold blue boxes.
Yeah, they sold blue boxes. Gates dumpster dived. There's a whole bunch. And speaking of, from security researchers' perspective, a lot of researchers got interested as teenagers by saying, oh, this malware is really interesting. I wonder how it works. And then applying that to security research. I mean, if you talk to any bunch of security researchers off the record and after a few drinks, which always really helps, they will say, look, some of the coding I did just noodling around, didn't release it or anything, but that could technically be considered to be making malware. And I think the only evidence I've seen is really of that level of involvement. And if he had been this sort of former hardcore hacker, he wouldn't
15 years old. That doesn't...
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, I think the government would have had a lot more evidence that they could have thrown at him if it was that clear, that and cut and dried.
Well, we'll follow it with interest. The only reason I brought it up is because you mentioned that sometimes handles can be a problem. And,
yes.
And part of the reason Brian Krebs was able to dig this stuff up is the relationship between Marcus Hutchins and the handle Flipperty Jobkins.
Yes.
And I'll leave that for you to read the rest.
Handles should change. I mean, in the interest of your right to know, the last one I'm willing to tell you was Grandmaster Fluffles.
It's no Flipperty Jobkins, but it's good. Grandmaster Fluffles.
You've got to have fun with these things, after all.
That's no name for a hacker.
It's perfect.
Our show today brought to you by Stamps.com. If you do mailing of any kind, whether it's brochures, invoices, or maybe you're an Amazon seller, an eBay seller, an Etsy seller, you really need Stamps.com. It makes all of your email, U.S. mail, more professional looking, makes it easier for you. You don't have to spend any time at the post office. You can do everything you would do, all the services of the U.S. Postal Service, right at your desk with Stamps.com. That means, yes, of course, buy and print official U.S. postage, but for any letter, any package, any class of mail, your computer and printer, you don't need to buy a postage meter or any special ink or anything like that. And what's cool about this, you can print right on the envelope. You can actually feed envelopes through your printer. It will automatically put your return address in. It'll put the recipient's address. It'll pull it out of your address book and works with a variety of different platforms. And then it prints the postage right on the envelope. It looks very professional. Your logo, everything. If you're mailing packages, we're going to give you a USB scale, so you plop the package on there. You get exactly the right postage. No more adding a little extra to make sure it's not postage due. No more licking stamps. And I get packages. Sometimes I get packages from people with like 100 stamps, and it's wrapped in brown twine. And not with Stamps.com. It's going to look great. It's going to show you off well, and you're going to get discounts you can't even get at the post office. In fact, we have such a good deal. I don't know why you wouldn't try our special offer. Go to Stamps.com right now. In the right-hand corner at the top there, you see that microphone where it says, you know, special offer for radio and podcast listeners. Go there, type in TWIT. It gets you the best offer, and it lets them know that you heard about it here. You get $55 in free postage. You get coupons for the free postage you can use over the first few months of your account. You get that USB scale. That's free. All you have to do is pay shipping and handling. It's about $5. They kind of make up for it by giving you a $5 kit with you know, all the kind of stuff that you need. You also, of course, get a free 4-week trial of Stamps.com. Stamps.com, unlike the post office, it never closes. You can print postage whenever you need it. And with this $110 bonus offer, there's no reason not to try it right now. Go to Stamps.com, click the microphone, enter TWIT, get all that good stuff, and see how Stamps.com can transform how you use the mail. It sure makes you look a lot more professional. Stamps.com. Don't forget the offer code. Click the microphone and use TWIT. This is one for you, Greg Farrow. Microsoft and Facebook just laid 4,100 miles of cable across the Atlantic capable of 160 terabits per second.
Yeah, now this is really, really important. And I just want to highlight some of the secrets behind this that a lot of people haven't thought about. One of the reasons for net neutrality and the fact that the government wants to tear it down is because the carriers want to be able to not install bandwidth. What they say is we need to be able to shape the traffic on the internet to protect users because we can't create enough bandwidth, and that's why.
Lies!
And so now what we have, it is an outright lie, absolutely outright lie. So what we have now seen is that Facebook and Microsoft, aka not AT&T or Verizon or Tata or Level 3 or any of the telcos in the world, ran a submarine cable across the Atlantic. It is actually a leading example of high speed, just so much bandwidth across the ocean here. And they did it in less than 2 years, and it was financed just out of the cost. So this is literally going to be a private network just for Facebook and Microsoft. Now, this is my argument, is this whole argument about removing net neutrality so that carriers can sustain the network for growth is literally just a way for them to avoid investing in their networks. And of course, if they don't have to spend money upgrading their network backbones, if they don't have to spend money replacing routers or dense wave division multiplexers and installing new fiber or overhauling the electronics gear at the end, then they make mega profits and stitch up their customers for nothing.
And that's why we have such crap internet in the United States compared with other
You don't have a competitive market. You've got one where the companies browbeat regulators into doing exactly what they wanted, and at the end of the day, we all end up paying through the nose.
Exactly right. So and this isn't if you want to look at the source is on Microsoft's blog. I'll post the link into the chat room. But This one here talks about the fact that it uses an open design. It's not using closed technology. So not only has Microsoft and Facebook partnered to build a cable, they've actually taken the technology, kicked out the normal bunch of losers that exist that make this technology, again, proprietary and closed. They're building open technology that can be, and they're actually expecting to get this running literally within another year. So 2 years to roll the cable across, and then another year before it's lit up. And it's just a huge amount of bandwidth, just so much faster than we can possibly have imagined. You don't need net neutrality. What we need is to kick the carriers into investing in their networks and rolling out upgraded backbones and new access technologies to give us the bandwidth that we want.
Which they were supposed to do when they got the tax break a decade ago, which we all gave them for, oh, this money is going to be used to connect up the US. And instead they took it and gave it back to shareholders or spent on useless, make work projects. I think this is a great thing too, although I was slightly interested that they're not actually connecting this to the UK, they're connecting it to Spain. And I wondered whether GCHQ's fondness for tapping overseas cables might have led them to think, you know what, maybe we'll just not put it into Cornwall like we usually do. We'll take it down to Spain and see if that's any better.
Interesting.
No, a lot of cables actually land down in Spain. So it's a choice. You either want to run the cables up around to – what you actually want to do is get them onto mainland Europe because that's where the bandwidth can be sold off and is actually where you want it to be. Landing cables onto Land's End in the UK just means you then have to trunk the bandwidth across the UK and then usually up to Amsterdam because Amsterdam's the main internet exchange or the main exchange point. So bringing it down south into Bilbao is not a bad idea. Because it gets you onto the mainland and you can trunk it up. That's the way the fiber networks. If you go to a website called Telegeography, they have a graphic which will show you the fiber runs under the ocean, and you'll see quite clearly that a lot of cables would either go north around the UK to Amsterdam to get right into the backbone, and that's the super low latency ones that you want for fin trading. And then you want the other ones, some of them come onto the UK, but they're for the UK market. But the UK is not usually a place. If you want to get up to Ireland to where Amazon and Apple and all those guys are, landing it on the UK soil is quite popular. And then the rest all land down in France or down in Spain because that's the fastest way to get onto the land, and the land's where the bandwidth is. And don't forget that Spain then takes you on into the rest of the world. So Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Egypt, into the North African companies, and then also the rest of Southern Europe. Laying cables in the Mediterranean is a popular pastime.
Yeah, and unfortunately also catching them on ships' anchors is a reasonably fairly popular pastime for some awkward buggers. But we had a couple of big breaks, was it 18 months ago?
Happens all the time. It's fairly constant. The cables are breaking fairly regularly. It's not just anchors. It's also animals under the ocean, ships sinking, currents, cyclones, all sorts of things. They break fairly regularly. The one about the anchor was that it broke the only cable that was running into Egypt at the time, and it was when the revolution was on, and it was originally seen as a terrorist act, and that's why it made the press. Again, liberal arts people, not with no technical competence, being asked to comment on the technology industry is a real disruption for us.
It's a real bugbear for you, this liberal arts thing, isn't it?
Is it easy to... I have a liberal arts degree, excuse me. Is it... Actually, I don't even have the degree. I just started. But I started. I tried. Is it easy to repair these? That's why it's not a big deal that they break?
Depends how deep they are.
It does. It depends. It's mostly about how many vessels there are available to repair cables. There's only about half a dozen in the world, and they're being used to repair cables. It takes like 2 or 3 months to repair a cable.
So it's not
the boat has to.
It's not something you want to have happen.
Yeah, well, the boat has to steam to where the cable is. Right. Then it has to send divers down, and it's not complicated in the sense that we know how to do this, and this is done.
Yeah, I've
every
watched
day.
them splice fiber optic cable. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah,
you can actually splice it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, the undersea cables are quite radical because they're like this thick. They're like can be a half a meter across.
This Microsoft article says that it's actually 1.5 times the size of a garden hose. It's not that big. It's a kind of an amazing technology that they're using.
There's some fascinating history as to how they developed these initial cables. And first they thought, well, if you just put a cable down and they got almost nothing but junk out of it, and then it broke.
Average depths of 11,000 feet, active volcanoes, earthquake zones, coral reefs. 8 pairs of fiber optic cables circled by copper, a hard plastic protective layer, and a waterproof coating. And boy, do they get bandwidth out of this thing. It's the highest speed subsea cable ever made. Incredible. Incredible.
So because it's so small, think about this. Because it's so small,
here
it
is,
doesn't
by
have
the
a
way.
lot of weight.
Yeah.
So there's lots of interesting things about small cables. So that as they go down, they don't have a lot of resistance, and once they hit the bottom, they don't actually sink as hard into the ocean floor, which causes lots of problems because normally you actually want them to sink into the floor. Anyway, there's a really good article on the Telegeography website. I posted a link into the chat room about what happens when they
this
break.
is fabulous.
Yes.
Thank you for that link, because
It's
this
fabulous.
is really cool there. And you can buy this map. It's expensive. It's $280, but they have an interactive online version. It really is. You know what? I might get this map just because it'd be so beautiful to have that on the wall.
Yeah, they release it every year. There's a new version of it, which doesn't change a lot from year to year because, and it takes several tens of millions of dollars to hundreds of millions of dollars to run those cables. One of the interesting things that's happening here is, of course, that Microsoft and Facebook are now replacing carriers and building their own bandwidth, which is also an interesting market transition. So instead of
It's not Sprint
up until-
anymore. It's not AT&T,
Yes.
not Verizon.
or Tata Communications or BT or any of those carriers, these companies now carry so much of the bandwidth. So Google, for example, says that its network carries 25% of the internet traffic today on its own internal network.
Wow.
So they're actually building their own.
So much for them free riding on Verizon's back.
Well, this is the international stuff, not so much inside of the US. Keep in mind here, there's a whole world, Leo.
The
It's not all
backbones
just
in the U.S. The backbones in the U.S. still are telco mostly, right?
Increasingly, they're owned by a bunch of investment banks who've been trenching in dark fiber all around the United States.
Interesting.
So speculatively investing. And what we have now is there are various this starts to get really arcane, so I won't go on for very much longer. But there was a real investment trend about 5 years ago. There was a bunch of tax breaks to be issued around ditching fiber into the ground, and now there are companies going around buying up those fibers and conglomerating them together and to sell them off into packages. So in the same way that we've seen RF bandwidth or spectrum created by the government and then sold off, we're now seeing dark fiber do the same. So there's plenty of cable in the ground for the backhaul. It's just not being done by AT&T and Verizon. It's being done by other companies.
Interesting.
But this was the primary reason why Google tried to get into fiber and tried to get that to work, was that they were sick of, entire areas of the US having very, very poor internet access and figured, right, we're going to see if we can do it. And they ran into so many problems that it now appears they've pretty much abandoned large-scale plans for that. But I think the technology companies are basically getting sick of being given the runaround by the telcos.
Well, what's happening is, again, comes back to what we said about open technology. So the technologies that they're using to propagate the signals down these cables are not owned by specific vendors. So there's traditional companies that make these technologies. What Microsoft and Facebook are doing is they've designed their own technology using off-the-shelf components to drive this fiber. And that's what they mean by open. Somebody in the chat room is asking that question. There are a few flip sides here. One is Google and Facebook and Amazon are now actually substantially larger than most of the telcos. The reason that Google's giving up on Google Fiber isn't because they found it technologically unfeasible or even legally infeasible. The short answer is that 5G will probably replace the need for cable in the ground in the short term. So 5G is going to give us gigabit to the house, most likely, and even at sub-rate. So if you're talking 50 to 100 megs, it's going to be much easier to put up a tower than it is going to be to try and put cable in the ground.
You see, I'm slightly skeptical about that because that was the story we were told with 4G originally, and it was going to be super fast and the rest of it. And 5G, they're still, 4G, they buggered around with the standards so much that WiMAX was 4G and LTE was 4G and enhanced 3G could possibly be sold as 4G. 5G was saying that, like I say, I'm skeptical, but that's purely based on past experience. Maybe you're right.
So the difference between 3G, 4G, and 5G is substantially to do with the spectrum allocations. At 5G, they're starting to talk about using 5 gigahertz, and also there's a bunch of spectrum around 40 gigahertz to 50 gigahertz, will fundamentally junk spectrum.
Isn't spectrum, though, a limited resource? I mean, doesn't that get in the way? You don't have an infinite spectrum.
You don't, but what we're seeing now is, so for example, with in Wi-Fi today, in the 802.11 AC standard, they're now talking about some of the numbers. It's getting a bit late over here, so some of my numbers are getting a bit stuck. But we're talking now about companies being able to use 40 kilohertz channels There are 60 channels of 40 kilohertz in the 5 gig standard, and some companies can do 3 MIMO channels over those. So you can actually start to do multiple streams over multiple radio frequencies simultaneously. Now, those are standards that are emerging and devices that support those, and there are challenges around running 3 antennas to propagate signals at speed, blah, 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 but we are seeing some iteration. Now, if you think about doing that in a broadband context from a base station, so today 3G, 4G uses older encoding mechanisms, and they are not often able to do what they call multi-spatial streams, so use multiple pieces of bandwidth in various directions for this is so hard to explain. But anyway, the answer is that the way they're working forward with 5G is they're not building the standards to be fixed and locked. So it's not meant to be 5G is this and that's it for time memoriam. There's a group of standards that form it, and there's meant to be an evolutionary thing. So in the same way that HTTP 2.0 has now just been called HTTP, it will continue to evolve in part for the rest of time, but there won't be a 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because otherwise it forces this punctuated equilibrium sequence where we work with this protocol until it doesn't do what we want, so then we leap forward to the next level. What we're looking at is 5G is meant to be a group of standards to do things like mesh backhaul, mesh forward haul, use a range of different spectrums, a range of different mediums. Some of them are designed for handsets, some of them are designed for Wi-Fi, some of them are public spectrum, some of them are private spectrum. It's a far more, and this is why the 5G standards haven't crystallized in some ways, is because there's so many wifty-wafty, like because we're not locking in on a specific area, it's sort of very amorphous, and it's, it's those experts who are trying to decide on that.
Sounds like you're going to have warring stakeholders here. I wonder if you're ever going to reach agreement.
It's the experts deciding what an elephant. You remember you ever seen that joke about the scientist with the blindfold and they're feeling the elephant?
Yeah.
The person feeling the leg, and So 5G is very much that. How do you decide which part of 5G do you go forward with? And yes, there's a whole bunch of intellectual property and patents and stuff that are stopping it from moving forward too, but that's a usual thing. Yeah.
Well, it's just one of many choices. We shall see what happens. Real quickly, a couple of highlights. I want to take a break, and then we will talk about Greg's favorite story. I can't even remember what it is anymore. But no, I do remember. Instagram has 800 million monthly users, 500 million daily active users.
Not one of them.
Well, it continues Facebook's dominance, right? Because they own Instagram. Well, if you don't want to use Facebook, use Instagram.
We've had so many lies come out of Facebook around the statistics and their numbers.
Can't always trust those numbers, can you?
Bear in mind also Facebook counts a video view as if you watch it for 3 seconds.
3 seconds, yeah.
Yeah. And then they announced, remember a few weeks back they announced that there was 35 million 18 to 35-year-olds in the UK, but there's only 60 million people in the country.
Yeah.
Okay. Numbers, they can be hard. Equifax's CEO says, give up. Quits. I'm sorry, retires.
No, they didn't even fire him.
He retired.
The CSO, the CIO, and the CEO have all retired with nice golden parachutes and not been fired and have their asses kicked out of the door as they should be.
Nice.
Sorry.
There's no part of this. There's no part of the Equifax thing that just, as a security professional, an ex-security professional for financial institutions, there's nothing but incompetence coming.
There's no excuse.
The stink of incompetence coming off this is just unbelievable. Yeah. Yes.
How about the Deloitte hack? Tell me about that. What do we know about Deloitte & Touche? Is a very well-known consultant for management consultant, right?
They were Gartner's Security Consultancy of the Year for the last 5 years.
They are also a security consultant.
Yes.
Well, that's not good.
Yeah, well, particularly when you consider they got 12,000, the day after this, people started looking into it, 12,000 open-facing systems around the world. They haven't instituted basic lockdown facilities. One of their guys was even posting admin logins and passwords on his public Google Plus page. Now,
it's easier to find him that way.
Well, yes, it is. But, we were discussing this in the office and is it incompetence or is it deliberately trying to run a honeypot? And we took Occam's razor and said, he's an idiot.
Wow. So when you see this kind of incompetence, especially from a firm that supposedly specializes in security, you really have to wonder what's going on.
I think part of the problem is that nobody knows what's going on within the company. You've got the salespeople promising the moon and the stars. You've got the IT department who's probably under budget and underfunded and not taken seriously by management. And you've got the layer 8 problem of a whole bunch of users that really don't know what the hell they're doing. So, I mean, this is typical with large companies in particular, but you would have thought a security consultancy selling these services at very high cost might have wanted to get their own systems sorted out before trying to fix other people's.
Oh, no. Gosh, no. They don't do that. They send their best consultants out to their customers.
Well, this is it, you know. So
as somebody who's worked extensively for institutions, and I use the word institutions with the word mental in the back of my head, these people really are that retarded that they would take their best security people and send them out to the customers for billable hours instead of actually securing their own systems. And internally, keep in mind, if you've got a bunch of really bright IT people inside your organization, guess how they treat their internal IT?
Yeah.
They're not a value, they're a problem. So
this makes Equifax look good.
No, nothing can make Equifax look good. I'm sorry. That was
I'm sorry. Equifax is bad.
This is what I don't understand. They've had 40 days before they went public to sort this out. The first website they stick up for people to check, and they must have known it was going to get spammed heavily because everyone was panicking. Horrible website. The catalogue of failure after failure they were linking out to a spoof site set up to show how easy it was to phish the site.
And they started relinking it.
And yeah, Tim at the social media thing started tweeting this thing out. I mean, it was just a catalogue of absolute rubbish.
The lack of competency at every level. Like there's fundamentally 4 things to a security policy. Don't get hit, so don't be penetrated. If they get in, detect that they're in, right? And if they're in and moving around inside of your organization, don't let them extract the data. Right? And then 4th, have a media strategy ready to go for when you get done.
Yeah.
Out of those 4, Equifax failed at all 4. Not just a little, comprehensively. They got owned to a basic vulnerability announced by Apache in March. They failed to patch it for over 4 months or to mitigate it. They should have had a mitigation capability. When the data was being stolen from their site, they didn't detect it. And I mean, you're talking about multiple gigabytes of data, probably hundreds of gigabytes of data being stolen over a period of time. They didn't detect when they were in, they didn't detect the exfiltration, and then they completely fumbled the media response afterwards. There is no reason for anybody to believe that Equifax can ever be an organization that's worthy of trust because nobody at any level of the organization clearly knew what they were doing.
What's the solution? Do you make a law? Do these people have to go to jail? How do you solve this? How do you enforce security in companies that hold very personal data about
the problem
us?
with the credit checking companies is that we're not actually customers of theirs.
Right.
You know, they just grab our data
We're just
and
their
sell
victims,
it. We are their
basically.
bitches, basically.
Yeah.
They grab our stuff, they sell it off to everyone else, and we don't really have a comeback on that. So the only way I can see to sort this out is if you're going to be a credit reference agency, you're going to be holding the keys to the kingdom when it comes to financial fraud, then you better have mandate audited, checked, and constantly checked security. Now, you're never going to stop an intrusion. Not even the NSA could stop their own systems being subverted. Yeah. But you've got to have a framework. You can't just say, well, it's laissez-faire. These things will sort themselves out.
No, they won't.
No, absolutely not.
But what is the consequence? How do we make this happen?
We need to see credit reference agencies or any surveillance company.
Forget credit reference. Our information is spread out over hundreds of companies.
So any company that's a surveillance company, Facebook, Netflix, Google, Amazon, credit reference agencies, medical institutions need to all be defined as critical infrastructure. And the government needs to define a bunch of rules around critical infrastructure.
As important as the grid. I agree with you.
That's exactly right. And they need to be treated as such. And then in the grid, if the CEO fails, then he is a criminal, right?
Right.
There is criminal negligence inside of those. And that fundamentally, I believe, is ultimately leads into our discussion around, what's happening with Scott Galloway and what he's been talking about.
Why people have lost faith in Silicon Valley.
Exactly.
We're going to take a break and do it. Patience. Young Greg. Patience. He's literally, if he had a bit, he'd literally be champing at it. Fortunately, he has no bit. That's pretty obvious. Our show today, Greg Farrow, packetpushers.net. Ian Thompson, register.co.uk. We intentionally booked no one else on this show. Now you know why. Normally we'd have a panel of 4. We decided with Greg and Ian and me jet-lagged, that's just exactly right. Perfect harmony. Our show today brought to you by FreshBooks, the ridiculously easy-to-use cloud accounting software. It starts, really, it's not accounting software. I hate to even use that phrase because it starts with invoices. If you are a freelancer, if you have a small business, the very first thing you have to do is collect your payments, collect your money by invoicing. And frankly, it was always the thing for me that was the hardest. I dreaded the end of the month and getting all the spreadsheets out and all of this. And thank goodness in 2004, I found FreshBooks. It was at the time just a little Toronto startup. And they saved my life. It made it easy for me to send out invoices. And whoa, lo and behold, if you bill people, eventually they pay you. In fact, on average, you get paid 11 days faster with FreshBooks. But this has become a great accounting system, kind of automatically now. Because, okay, you send out the invoices, you collect the money, you know which invoices have been paid, which haven't, what are your receivables, you know what your expenses are because it also handles expenses, whether you bill them to the client or not. Pretty soon you realize that the information they have, they're giving you on their dashboard a beautiful, crystal clear look at how you're doing. Something small businesses and individuals rarely know. Are you making a profit right now? Well, usually we have to wait till tax time to figure that one out. You'll know at every moment how you stand, how you're doing. And there's so many nice features. They're always adding features. It's a web app. So you can always, there's more every week. Sticky headers allow you to scroll through any page while the headers shrink and remain at the top. It's really slick. So you know exactly, it's easy to view which pages or columns. You can see which invoices have been sent, which have been paid. You can even see which invoices have been viewed. So no more runaround. I didn't get your invoice. Yes, you did. You read it. I can see that right here. You can reward prompt clients and encourage customer loyalty by adding discounts automatically in your recurring templates. Bill for time by client, by project, assign services to projects and designate different rates for each service. Press play to track your time to the minute in the app or on the website. And all your time entries are sorted chronologically on the invoice for you. Automatically. It's beautiful. Your customers, your clients look at this, they go, oh, this guy's got it down. This gal knows how to run a business. They pay you fast because, well, you're professional with them. They're going to be professional with you. See receipt attachments when you view invoices in the iOS app. Employees can log into the FreshBooks mobile app for iOS so that they can take care of business wherever they are, offloading you a little bit. The full description of every line item is now visible while viewing an invoice on mobile. It's just getting better and better. FreshBooks was included in the Forbes Small Giants list this year, 2017, rightly so. This is a great company making a great product that's getting better all the time. No wonder 10 million people now use FreshBooks. You could be one of them. Try it free for 30 days. FreshBooks.com/twit. FreshBooks saved my life. Let it save yours. FreshBooks.com/twit. We thank them so much for making Twit possible. So, what is going on? I actually first became acquainted with this when our friend Mike Elgin wrote an article for Fast Company. And I think this is what you're talking about, right, Greg? Why the public's love affair with Silicon Valley might be over. But you're referring to somebody else.
Yeah, I think this article is loosely based off something that's been discussed by Professor Scott Galloway. Now, he works for New York University. He's a tenured professor. He's a company called L2 Inc., and he has a pretty amazing YouTube channel. And one of the messages, and he also has a history of being right about this sort of stuff also, by the way. And his point is that the worm has turned. So for the past 10, 20 years, we've all said that, Amazon, Apple, Facebook, Google, they're all doing amazing things. They're bringing humanity forward.
The four horsemen of the technology apocalypse.
That's right. But what's happening is we're now suddenly falling out of love with Facebook. We've got the Russian hacking scandal. We've got Uber having its license pulled in London. We've got Google suddenly, the do no evil starts to look like a bro boys club where women aren't accepted. James Damore and that sort of stuff. This whole surveillance things. Look at the Equifax thing is a part of this. These so-called technology companies, we've seen the Procero juice, debacle. All these startups that have just pointless tech nerds who thought that, tech nerds who probably could have used somebody with a liberal arts degree to tell them that they're pretty stupid, actually, for a while. And so what he's trying to say is that all of these companies are stupid. And what he's doing is backing this up with some interesting evidence. And his point is these people are destroying billions of dollars of market value. So companies like Kroger, for example, are sunk from $28 billion to $20 billion. These are the people who employ people. So Walmart actually employs like 50,000 employees in the States. Amazon does it with 10,000. So if you're a government and you're looking at the $64 billion in tax paid since 2008 from Walmart and the $1 billion paid in tax from Amazon, who do you start legislating for?
Yeah.
Right? If you're Apple in the Europe and you're looking at the European Union coming after you for tax revenue and you're going, oh, but we, and you've only paid $1 billion instead of $20 billion over the last 10 years. And then all of a sudden you say to the governments, but you should protect us. We need help. The governments are going like, you're not paying tax. You're not actually a citizen here. You're not paying enough money to participate in modern society. So here in the UK, you now have the UK government starting to get after Facebook and Google and Netflix and saying, if you don't start paying tax in this country, we are going to have to create tax laws specifically to get you.
How
and
is this
doing
different
the same thing.
than Ludditism? How is this different than the traditional fear of technology that government and other slow-moving incumbents have always had?
Look, there is an element of this in that the tech community is, as Greg has pointed out, we're building technologies like self-driving cars, like smarter systems, which are going to put enormous numbers of people out of work in the next decade or so. And there is no plan to deal with this. And if you talk to the technology, I mean,
I would blame politicians for that. They're the ones who are lying to people. Who was it? The Treasury Secretary. Somebody said, "Oh no, automation is not even. We're not worried about that." They're lying. They don't want people to know that this is coming. They don't want to have people retrain. They want to pretend that coal's coming back, that there's going to be jobs for you as a miner. That's a lie. And also, it's not fair to people. So government's more to blame than technology. Technology is going to solve these problems.
Well, no, technology is creating some of these problems.
But that's
if you speak to
humans
anybody
are creating these. This is called progress.
I've spoken to numerous self-driving car people working on self-driving cars.
Get rid of self-driving cars. What we need is more children in the factories making shoes.
None of them have even a clue as to how to deal with this, and they don't care because it's not their problem. And as Greg points out, particularly, and this is less so in this country, but certainly back in the UK, when it came out that Google had paid, what was it, Greg? It was something like
30 million.
Yeah, 30 million in tax.
On 8 billion in tax on 8 billion of revenue.
It just, you can't do that and expect to say, well, I'm a good citizen and you should protect me.
I can match every point on this list of negatives, and there are many, obviously, with positive points, things that technology has brought us, and our lifespan is longer.
Amazon has paid, since 2008, Amazon has paid $1 billion in tax to the U.S. government. And yet Amazon is totally dependent on roads, businesses, electricity, workers, healthcare.
And we should all be upset about that. So should they? Is that just tax reform we need to?
So what we've seen is that technology companies
they're taking advantage, by the way, of loopholes created by the incumbent companies who all along haven't wanted to pay taxes and take advantage of that infrastructure. These are tax laws that are on the books. Google comes along. It's not Google's fault. They're not Apple's fault. They're taking advantage of tax laws that were created not by them but by their predecessors.
Yeah, but they industrialized the abuse of those systems. So where before the systems weren't being abused at multi-billion-dollar scale, they're being done at a minor scale.
Like everything with technology, they're just better at it.
Yeah. But the flip side of this is that in the US, Amazon has actually got a competitive advantage over its by just choosing not to make a profit. You only pay tax when you make a profit. So if you build a business that doesn't make profit, you don't pay tax. So now all of a sudden Amazon can outcompete Walmart because it doesn't have to carry that liability on its books.
Yeah, Microsoft in its last quarter paid a minus 8% tax rate. You know, because they managed to wipe off all the stuff from Nokia.
Mm-hmm. So the governments have a problem. They need the revenue to sustain the internal systems. I mean, in America in particular, there's not enough money to fund a police force that's going to keep society secure. The reason that the police force has been part of militarizing is because they're frightened because there's not enough of them. How would you feel if you were like, what is the policing ratio in the UK? I think it's 1 to 100,000, something like that. And in the US, it's even much, much smaller. If there was any sort of significant societal upheaval in the US, there's simply...
Oh, I'm sorry. This autoplay video gets me every time.
So I think there's a whole bunch of things here. One is that they don't pay tax, or they're pursuing strategies which deliberately avoid paying tax and maximize growth. And at some point, Amazon, by never, ever paying any tax, is going to become so large and so dominant that the governments are just going to have to say it's a monopoly and break it up. That's the logical extension of this. Is if Apple continues to get any larger as a nation state, like a corporate nation state, the only way governments are going to be able to tax it or to control it is if they force it to break up as a monopoly. And what Professor Galloway is making the point is that Amazon and all of these companies can't continue as they are because they're just not paying enough, not contributing enough back to the societies that they take from.
I think there's also...
He says we're barreling toward regulation.
Yes.
That's basically the message here, is that governments are going to, their backbones are going to stiffen. You're going to get greater regulation.
Well,
what does that mean? Does that mean break
nice.
up Amazon or just tax Amazon appropriately?
No, I think we're already seeing this in the European Union, where they're coming up with tax plans and they're saying, right, we're going to tax you on revenue that you make in our country, not on profit, because that is a better way to do it. Because at the moment, you're licensing your technology off to people in Holland or in Ireland.
They can bury the revenue.
Yeah, you can bury it that way. So the European Union is saying, right, we're now, and they've moved astonishingly quickly on this in the last month or so, saying we're going to go after revenue.
Isn't there a risk though? I mean, do Amazon and Apple?
Is Amazon
and Microsoft
suddenly not going to sell in Europe? I mean, it's never going to happen. They need customers, and they need the internet backbone and the
Wouldn't you submit that Europe needs them as much as they need Europe?
Europe's done okay for the last 2,000 years before Amazon. I think we'll knock on.
I think it's terrifying. I think the idea of governments deciding, oh, these technology companies suck, they're not paying enough taxes, let's get rid of them. We don't need them. That's terrifying. Which do you prefer? Which would you rather have? The governments we've got out there or the companies we've got out there? I think the companies are doing a hell of a lot better job.
Really? You think Uber is
not Uber, but Amazon, Microsoft, maybe not Facebook. Facebook's suspect. Google.
So the point is that I think the usefulness of these companies has reached the limits of what they can achieve, and we now need to reevaluate where we are. So, for example, there's a law that's now enacted across the whole of the European Union called the GDPR, the General Protection Data Act,
nightmare.
Which basically
it's a nightmare.
It's a nightmare for Facebook because they have to delete user data after 2 years, mandated, absolutely not unequivocal. So,
why?
No, it's why should
is it ridiculous?
It is an excessive burden on the business. It's ridiculous, and it's a fundamental misunderstanding of how technology works, I think.
No, it's actually quite a well-written piece of legislation. It's not perfect, and it won't be but what we do have is companies in Silicon Valley that go broke and pick up their data and sell it off to another company in the disposal.
You don't think there's a peril that they're doing this at their peril, that this will be so damaging to techno companies that it will set us back, that it's going to... This is a recipe for a dark age. This is the dark ages saying, she's a witch, burn her.
Sorry, no one is saying no one is proposing putting Jeff Bezos up on a spike and burning his corpse. Although I can know some of his competitors who really quite like that. But I mean, at the same time, they've had a free reign for so long, and there's a certain arrogance creeping in, which is Tim Cook in Congress last year, for example. He was talking about, we had the Trump tax plan come out this week, and Trump said they would be doing a once-in-a-lifetime one-off tax break to allow the $2.5 trillion being stored outside the US to be brought back in, and they probably they'll do a special lower tax rate. The only problem is we did this in 2004 with the Home Loan Investment Act, and all that money just went directly to shareholders, apart from Dell, who built a very small factory in Texas.
Is your complaint that capitalism is failing?
No, I think politicians need to grow a pair and start making sure that everyone plays by the same rules. Yeah. If I went to the IRS and said, well, my outgoings were pretty bad this year, don't forget about the salary, I'm kind of made a bit of a loss, so just can you give me some money?
Do you feel that the Department of Justice prosecution of Microsoft in the late 90s helped our situation? Do you think it made things better?
I think it was a classic example of why the US situation was so bad, because at the end of the day, Microsoft got a slap on the wrist from the DOJ. The real impetus on Microsoft to move was the EU, which didn't take such a laissez-faire attitude. The DOJ settled with Microsoft for really a slap on the wrist.
Yeah, and I mean the answer is
but look what we got in the EU. We got the browser ballot.
And well, what's wrong with giving people the choice of their browser?
We get this insane cookie message that
I know
is
you hate that
completely
one.
meaningless. We get crap from governments that don't understand technology. Now, I'm not going to disagree with you that the technologists are arrogant and that these companies are running roughshod, but I'm not convinced that any government, even the wonderful Margaret Vestager, knows what to do with these guys in a way that's going to be responsible and work.
But you've got to have that.
I think the GDPR is going to end up being a nightmare.
This is why you need that counterbalance, because if say, for example, the governments have said on the Internet Explorer case, well, it's your operating system, you do what you want with it. And that's what they did do initially, and we ended up with Internet Explorer having 90% of the market, and then Microsoft just
the
said,
market took care of it, not the DOJ or the EU.
Well, no, Microsoft
putting Sleepnear on the ballot for browsers did not fix that problem.
No, but at the same time,
it was completely reasonable for Microsoft to put a browser in its operating system.
Yeah, but not then once it had got a monopoly position in the browser market to say, yeah, we're not going to bother developing that for a few years. And before you know it, they got a massive security problem, which the end user was paying for.
Yeah.
It took Mozilla to come along and actually force Microsoft to do some development work, and later Chrome, before that change. But
so what is the end game on this? Do we get a negotiation and a balance between these two mighty powers?
I think there's a couple of things. I think we're going to see a few things happen here. One of them is I was listening to a podcast this week with a group of economists arguing over what the future of capitalism looks like. And the point that one of them was trying to make is that companies like Apple and Amazon have actually found ways to hack capitalism in their favor. And
I don't think it's a hack. I think it's the nature of late-stage capitalism. But go ahead.
I agree.
This is what capitalism. This is what free market capitalism drives toward.
Yeah, effectively, it drives late-stage capitalism, and it's not unlike what happened in the 1700s in the Europe right at the time. But let's not try and pretend that everything repeats exactly the same, because it doesn't. Everything's different every single time.
Here's a chance to do it better.
Yeah, so what we're now seeing is that the tech giants are basically becoming the robber barons of the modern era.
Yep.
They have so much data, they have so much funding, so much capital, just so much ability to move in any direction they want. There's no regulations or restriction. There's no competitive situation for them to be normal. And so now we have a situation where they're uncontrolled. And importantly, they're now at a position where they can move governments, but they're not paying any taxes to governments. So government's now in a situation where they can go and squash these organizations because there's no tax money coming from them. There's no penalty. All there is what's happening in public. And increasingly, the public perception of companies like Uber and Apple and Facebook is switching against them. And once they lose public opinion, they lose everything. There's no support behind them because they don't pay taxes. They don't participate in society. They're not contributing to the ordinary people. They take everything and consume it and generate profits for themselves. They're not actually a valuable part of society more widely.
Really?
And so
you don't think that we have benefited from the powers and hegemony of these companies that they – I mean, we talk a lot about Apple, Google, Facebook, and Amazon and Microsoft, but really there are 1,000 tech companies doing incredible innovation, changing the world in dramatically good
And there's no
ways.
reason, and there's no reason why that should stop. They just have to play by the same rules as the rest of us.
They're playing by the exact same rules as the rest of us.
No, they're not.
Are they breaking the law?
Pretty much.
Well, Uber, definitely.
Okay, Uber is a really bad example.
Okay.
I will grant you that Uber – there are, they're Theranos. There are companies that are bad. I'm not saying there aren't. In fact, I'm kind of like with Greg. I'm not a big fan of giant corporations either. But I'm afraid we're going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I'm afraid that we are going to over-regulate technology out of existence, and we're going to create a new dark age. I don't want the EU to be running
the point is
the world.
We don't have a choice. We're now at we're at the point in this cycle where we have to throw the baby out with the bathwater, or these people are going to.
You guys are all going to be out of jobs.
That's the risk we have to take because these people are so out of control.
I mean, at the end of the day,
how are your physical labor skills? How are you good at making things with your hands?
I'm a reasonable jobbing carpenter, but I see. Look, it's not good. We have this argument every time the corporate tax rate comes up. It's just like, well, in Britain there was this big thing. Vodafone was due to pay like $6 billion in tax, and they reached a deal with the UK tax authorities that they only pay $1.5 billion. Now, a company like Vodafone isn't going to say, well, we don't like your tax rules, we're going to stop doing business in the UK, because it hurts them more than it hurts the authorities.
Yeah.
But governments are now just rolling over to these people. I mean, look at the number of tax breaks that are being offered to host Amazon's next headquarters.
I think they do that because they feel like there is a benefit in the long run to fostering technology. This is how we move. This is progress. This is how we move into the future.
Well, yeah, but I mean, okay, the Foxconn factory, which is supposedly being banned, that's a
joke.
That's costing $100,000 a job, maybe even $1 million.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I think the
I agree with you that we should stop, but that doesn't mean we need to.
No, I mean, we don't need to regulate them out. We don't need to
companies.
regulate them out of existence. But something like GDPR is a perfectly reasonable thing to do, to say to companies.
We should do a show on GDPR.
Yeah, no, I'd be well up for that.
Because it's a complex law and there's a lot of consequences.
I think the point
idea
here is that
I agree with is that you own your data and that these companies should be compelled to delete your data periodically and
to protect it.
To protect your data.
Yeah.
And I'm not against that. I'm really not against that. It does offer some technical challenges, though, because the internet is a fundamentally global system. It's not in Germany or France or the UK.
But no company invented the internet. No company invented the World Wide Web.
No.
Government did.
You know, it's... Yeah.
Well,
it's all government. The government invented the internet at every level.
We need government investment, I'll grant you, in science. A lot of science doesn't
But
get
the only
done
way you
unless
can
the
do that
government
is if
does
you
it.
have taxes. And the only way that taxes gets collected is
Right.
by and large from corporate taxes.
Yeah.
And I think that there was an
Wait till we
article in
get
the
robots.
Telegraph.
Wait till we get robots. They won't be paying any taxes.
Yeah.
Nope.
They're talking about robot taxes. But anyway,
Gates
there was an
is-
article in the Telegraph this week about Uber, and apparently the majority of Londoners are actually for Uber getting stripped of its license. So Uber is losing the PR war. So
why did London boot Uber?
Because they failed to comply with the if you want to run a public taxi service in the UK, you've got to have your drivers checked to make sure they're not dodgy. If they assault a passenger, that's got to be reported, and you've got to play it reasonably fair with the police and with regulatory authorities.
Medical checks, criminal checks.
Yes, medical. Yeah,
And Uber refused to do any of that?
yeah. Refused to do any of that, and also deployed what's the grey thing?
Oh God, grey ball. Yeah,
introduced grey ball to try and dodge.
And then the piece de resistance. The piece de resistance was, we don't trust them.
Yeah.
We don't trust them.
That was literally
Who said that?
The TfL, which is the licensing authority for taxis, said we do not believe that Uber is a trustworthy organization.
Well, by the way, TfL might have a dog in this hunt. They've got a lot of black cabs and cabbies that might be out of work.
No, the black cab, the separate organization completely.
Okay.
The TfL is a Quango, a semi-government organization that just regulates public transport in London.
Yeah, but don't you think they act in the interest of the, I don't know, they call them in the UK, but the medallion holders?
Oh, no, I mean, honestly, they don't need TfL.
They don't care.
When Uber...
There are three other
I just have to say, as a customer, if I'm going to go to London, I'm going to miss Uber.
That's all right. You can use one of the other ones.
Honestly, London's got the best.
There's three others.
Okay.
There's three other ride-hailing companies in London that are just as good, if not better, than Uber. When I was in Prague,
I have a hard time. I want to delete Uber. I agree. It's pretty convenient.
But I flew into Prague in Czechoslovakia about 6 weeks ago for the IETF conference, and they had a perfectly fine app from a company called Liftago, and it worked exactly like Uber, and it worked fine. And I spoke, and it was a person in a black car with a nice clean car and blah blah blah.
Uber exists. I'm not sure this is true in London, but in most places, certainly in the U.S., because cabs are such a god awful experience, right?
Certainly in San Francisco,
in New York. They're a god-awful experience.
Oh, no, cabs in New York are great.
I'll never forget going in Paris, and it started snowing, and all the cab drivers rolled up their windows, lit their galois, and opened the papers and said, no, they would not give us a ride. There's a reason Uber exists. They're disintermediating a broken system.
Only in certain locations does it actually work. So in New York, Uber made sense. But at the same time, Uber has deployed inexcusable practices to prevent
I agree.
competitors
I mean,
from emerging.
I agree, but
literally, TfL basically said, we don't trust what Uber has submitted to us. They've consistently failed to comply. We've taken it as far as we can.
So Dara, the CEO, went over there.
Yeah. And actually admitted there was a problem, which is
we're gonna see if we can fix this.
But then, while he was away, Travis appointed 2 new board directors.
What a
and
mess. We could go on and on with Uber, but we can't because we're done.
But what I'm saying here
We've done 2.5 hours, gentlemen.
Yes. But what I'm saying here is that they're losing the PR war. So as we're seeing increasingly, people are turning against Facebook. They distrust Google. Apple's starting to lose its privileged position. People aren't lining up for the iPhone 8, in part because why am I continuing? I think
there is a backlash. I agree with you. There's a backlash. Yeah.
And the point is, how do we solve it? I don't know, but
I'm
just
well aware of it. In fact, have in some cases been the purveyor of the backlash.
Hey, listen, I mean, it's just when things get to this level of this stage, you've got to start getting some triage in place. Otherwise, it is going to be Luddites taking over things. So if we're actually smart about this and the tech companies think it through, they'll see it's in their long-term interests to actually play a level playing field. If they don't, well, then they're thinking short-term, they're stupid, and we're all screwed.
And it is a clarion call to these companies that maybe it's time for them to think about what they're doing, sit down with government, and come to a compromise that benefits everybody instead of being rapacious robber barons.
But what worries me is you've got Zuckerberg doing his not presidential
He's going to run for president. And that's one way to fight this is to take over the government.
Yeah, no, I mean...
Doesn't half the science fiction stories talk about how it's a
you could argue we're in... Yeah,
it's run by corporations.
You could argue that we're getting into the Asimov Merchant Princes scenario for the Foundation. But I would much rather have democratic government.
Oh, we lost that a long time ago. You're such a dreamer.
Yes.
Oh, well, one day.
Ian Thompson, someday we will have a democracy. He is a reporter for The Register. If you don't go to theregister.co.uk every single day and read, you're missing out on some of the best writing, the best snark in the business. And Ian is a very important part of all that. It's always a pleasure to have you here.
Always fun as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And of course, Greg Farrell, what can I say? Just a fount of wisdom. He's at packetpushers.net. Well, don't tell me that now. I believe everything. I believe everything you say. It is great to have you both. This was a very fun conversation, and I hate to cut it off, but I gotta go. So,
yeah, you
to the bathroom. So I just can't.
Okay, TMI.
Hey, it's been a lot of fun. We thank you for joining us. We do This Week in Tech every Sunday afternoon. It's so nice to be back. I have to say, I love doing this show so much, and I really am grateful to our hosts who filled in. Father Robert Balasair, who ran the show. Becky Worley did a great job. But you don't have this seat yet. I love coming here every Sunday, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, 2200 UTC. We will do it for you live if you want to watch at twit.tv/live. If you do, please join the conversation behind the scenes in the chat room at irc.twit.tv. You can even listen live on your Echo. I got to mention this. YouTube turned off the video on the Echo show. I'm a little pissed off about that. But you can always listen. If you just say, Echo, listen to Twit Live on TuneIn, you can listen to what's going on right now, or pick your favorite show, and you can say, Echo, listen to This Week in Tech on TuneIn. It'll play the most recent episode. So another great way for you to listen. You can also subscribe using your favorite podcast app. I wish you would. I thank you all for being here, and I will see you next time. Thanks to our studio audience, who's got buns of steel. Just anytime. We'll put a more comfortable seat out for you next time, but anytime. Just email tickets@twit.tv. We'd love to have you. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time. Another Twit is in the can.
This is amazing.
Doing the Twit.